There is a moment in the final minutes of the 9th episode of Game of Thrones' first season where everything the show has promised you turns out to be a lie. Not a lie of bad faith, a lie of misdirection. You have spent 9 hours learning to trust a man, Ned Stark, the hand that steadies his daughters, the voice that speaks plainly in rooms full of liars, the moral center of a story that has, until this exact second, felt like it belonged to him. And then a boy king raises his hand, a sword comes down, and Ned Stark's head rolls across the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor. The crowd screams, his daughters scream, and you sit in your living room understanding, perhaps for the first time, that this show does not care about your comfort. It does not care about the rules you brought with you from other stories. The good man does not win because he is good. The father does not survive because he has children. The hero does not live because the camera has been following him. That is the first dark story Game of Thrones ever told. It was not the last. Not by a very long distance. This video is about the darkness that runs through Game of Thrones like a vein of black ore through stone. Not the violence for its own sake. Not the shock moments designed to trend on social media the next morning. The real darkness. The kind that sits with you. The kind that changes how you understand a character you thought you already knew. The kind that makes you set down your phone, stare at the screen, and realize that this show just did something to you that you did not consent to and cannot undo. We are going to walk through the darkest stories this show ever told, from the very first season to the very last, and we are going to look at what they actually mean. Not just what happened, what it cost, what it revealed, what it said about the world these characters live in, and, sometimes, what it said about the world we live in too. Welcome to the long night. Get comfortable, settle in, turn the lights down low. This is going to take a while, and every minute of it is going to be worth your time. And if you have not subscribed yet, it really does help us keep making these. Hit that button and come with us. Let us get into it. There is a specific kind of cruelty that comes from hope. Not from its absence, from its presence. The darkest moments in Game of Thrones are almost never the ones where a character has nothing left. They are the ones where a character has just enough left to believe things might be okay. And then the floor drops out. That is the architecture of this show's darkness. It does not just hurt you, it lets you believe you are safe first. And that belief, that tiny, desperate belief that maybe this time the story will be kind, is what makes the knife go deeper. Nowhere is that more evident than in the death of Ned Stark. The episode is called Baelor. It is the 9th episode of the first season. It aired on June 12, 2011, directed by Alan Taylor, and written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. And it changed television. That is not hyperbole. Before this episode, the rules of prestige drama were understood. You could kill a supporting character. You could kill a villain. You could even kill a beloved character if it happened at the end of a series, as a sacrifice, as a completion of an arc. What you did not do was kill the protagonist of your show, the man whose face was on the poster, the actor whose name was above the title, 9 episodes into your first season. Sean Bean was the biggest star in the cast. Ned Stark was the character the audience had been trained to follow, to trust, to root for. He was the moral compass, and Game of Thrones snapped that compass in half and threw it into the dirt. But the genius of the episode, the thing that makes it genuinely dark and not merely surprising, is in how it builds hope before it destroys it. Because the show gives you every reason to believe Ned will survive. It lays out an escape route. It paves it with logic. It makes the rational outcome the merciful one. Cersei has offered Ned a deal. Confess to treason. Declare Joffrey the rightful king. Take the black and go to the wall. Varys visits Ned in the dungeon and tells him plainly that his daughters' lives depend on his cooperation. And Ned, for the first time in the entire series, bends. He does the thing he has never done. He lies. Think about what that costs him. This is a man who has built his entire identity on telling the truth. A man who rode south to King's Landing because he believed it was his duty. A man who confronted the queen to her face, told her he knew the truth about her children, and gave her the chance to flee before he brought the evidence to Robert. He could have gone behind her back. He could have whispered to the king first. But Ned Stark does not do things that way. He walks up to the lioness and tells her what he knows because, in his bones, he believes that honesty is not just a strategy. It is the only way to be a person. And now, standing on the steps of the Sept of Baelor, in front of a crowd of hundreds, in front of his daughter Sansa, in front of the court that has imprisoned him, Ned Stark lies. He confesses to crimes he did not commit. He calls himself a traitor. He says the words that Cersei and the council have prepared for him, and the show lets you believe it worked. For a few seconds, the deal appears to hold. The High Septon stands ready to pronounce the terms of his mercy. The crowd waits. Sansa watches from the steps, believing that her cooperation, her pleading with Joffrey, has saved her father. And Ned has made peace with the cost. He has traded his honor for his life, and he will carry that shame to the wall, where it will eat at him for the rest of his days. But at least his days will continue, and at least his daughters will be safe. And then Joffrey opens his mouth. The boy king overrides the agreement. He declares that the soft hearts of women and the treason of traitors are of no interest to him. He commands Ser Ilyn Payne to bring him Ned Stark's head, and the camera catches the moment where understanding arrives on Ned's face. Not fear, exactly. Something deeper than fear. The recognition that honor and dishonor were never the relevant categories. That the system he believed in, the system of oaths and agreements and the king's word, does not function in this city. It never did. His entire moral framework was built for a world that does not exist. Cersei panics. She grabs Joffrey's arm. This was not the plan. Varys pushes forward through the crowd, trying to stop what is about to happen. Even the Hound looks uncomfortable, but no one stops it. The sword comes down. Ice, the great sword of House Stark. The blade that Ned himself used to execute deserters in the very first scene of the very first episode, is used to take his head. His own sword, his own justice, turned on him in a city where justice is just a word people use to decorate their cruelty. The show cuts to Arya. She is in the crowd. She has been watching from the base of the statue of Baelor, and Ned saw her. In his final moments he looked out and found her face, and he called out to Yoren, the Night's Watch recruiter, and said one word, Baelor. A direction, a last act of fatherhood. Yoren grabs Arya, pulls her close, presses her face into his chest so she cannot see. But she knows. The sound of the crowd tells her everything. And then the show cuts to Sansa. And this is perhaps the cruelest shot in the entire episode. Because Sansa believed. She went to Joffrey. She begged. She did everything that a young girl in a story is supposed to do to save her father. She played the game the way she understood it. The way the songs and the stories had taught her it worked. The princess pleads with the king, and the king shows mercy. That is how the story goes. That is how every story she has ever heard goes. But this is not that story. The camera holds on Sansa's face as she realizes it, and what crosses her features is not just grief. It is the death of a worldview, the annihilation of a framework for understanding how the world works. In the span of 5 seconds, Sansa Stark goes from a girl who believes in the system to a girl who has been betrayed by it so completely that she will spend the next 7 seasons rebuilding herself from the wreckage. This needs to be stated plainly. The death of Ned Stark is not a plot twist. It is a thesis statement. It is the show telling you, in the clearest possible terms, what kind of story you are watching. This is a story where goodness is not armor, where doing the right thing does not protect you, where the structures of power, the thrones and the oaths, and the sacred laws of hospitality and mercy are only as strong as the people who choose to uphold them. And when those people are a teenage sociopath with a crown and a grudge, those structures crumble like wet paper. The aftermath is just as dark, though the show parcels it out slowly. In the very next episode, the season finale, Fire and Blood, which aired on June 19, 2011, Joffrey takes Sansa to the walls of the Red Keep and forces her to look at her father's head, mounted on a spike. He tells her he is going to give her Robb's head too. Sansa stares at the severed head of the man who raised her, and for a brief, flickering moment, she considers pushing Joffrey off the walkway. The Hound stops her, but the impulse is there. The girl who believed in mercy and songs now knows what a head looks like on a spike, and it belongs to her father. Ned's death ripples outward through every storyline the show will ever tell. Robb's war, Arya's transformation into a killer, Sansa's education in cruelty and power, Jon's isolation at the wall, Catelyn's desperate, unraveling grief. Every Stark story that follows is, in some way, a response to this moment, and the show knows it. Every time a Stark child makes a choice, every time they trust or refuse to trust, every time they show mercy or withhold it, they are answering the question that Baelor asked. Is it worth being good in a world that punishes goodness? Is honor worth dying for? And if it is not, what do you become when you let it go? The answer, the show suggests across 8 seasons, is complicated. Arya becomes a weapon. Sansa becomes a strategist. Jon becomes a leader who keeps trying to be Ned, keeps trying to do the right thing, and keeps nearly dying for it. And Robb, poor Robb, becomes a cautionary tale of a different kind. But that is a story for later. For now, let this settle. The first great darkness of Game of Thrones is the death of hope itself. Not the death of Ned Stark. The death of the idea that Ned Stark's goodness would be enough. The show killed that idea on the steps of the Sept of Baelor, and it never ever brought it back. But the death of Ned Stark, as devastating as it was, followed a certain logic. A cruel boy had power he should not have had, and he used it cruelly. You could trace the chain of cause and effect. You could understand, even through your horror, how it happened and why. The system was corrupt. The king was a monster. The good man was outmaneuvered. It was awful, but it was legible. You could read the text and see where the cracks formed and how the building fell. What the show did 2 seasons later was something different. Something that resisted legibility. Something that operated not just outside the rules of television, but outside the rules of civilization itself. In a castle called the Twins, at a wedding feast, under a roof that was supposed to be sacred, the show committed an act of narrative violence so profound that it redefined what audiences believed television was willing to do to them. The Red Wedding did not just kill characters. It killed assumptions. It killed the belief that certain spaces were safe, that certain moments, weddings, celebrations, the breaking of bread between families, were protected by a code so ancient and so universal that no story would dare violate it. Other shows killed characters at battles, at dramatic confrontations, at moments of high tension. Game of Thrones killed them at a party, while music played, while wine flowed, while a bride was carried from the room and the guests laughed and the candles burned low. The domesticity of the setting is what makes it so devastating. This was not a battlefield. This was a feast. And the violation of that sacred space is what separates the Red Wedding from every other act of violence the show ever committed. If you are enjoying this so far, a quick subscribe goes a long way toward helping us make more of these. The episode is called The Reigns of Castamere. It is the 9th episode of the 3rd season. It aired on June 2nd, 2013. It was written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and directed by David Nutter. And even people who have never watched Game of Thrones know what happened in it, because the reaction videos alone became a cultural event. Millions of people filmed themselves watching someone else watch the Red Wedding for the first time, because the pain on those faces was a mirror of their own, and there was something cathartic, something almost necessary, about seeing that pain reflected back. But the reaction videos, the memes, the cultural shorthand of the Red Wedding as a synonym for narrative betrayal, all of that has, over time, obscured what actually happens in the episode. And what actually happens is worse than most people remember. To understand the Red Wedding, you have to understand guest right. In the world of Game of Thrones, guest right is sacred. It is older than the 7 kingdoms, older than the faith of the 7. It may be older than recorded history. When a host offers bread and salt to a guest, that guest is under the host's protection. No harm may come to them under that roof. This is not a suggestion. It is not a custom that people follow when it is convenient. It is a law so fundamental that violating it is considered an offense against the gods themselves, old and new. Walder Frey knows this. He knows it with the same certainty that he knows the sun will rise. And when Robb Stark arrives at the Twins with his mother, his wife Talisa, his bannermen, and his army, Walder Frey offers them bread and salt. He stands in his hall, this ancient, vindictive, petty man, and he performs the ritual. He gives them food, he gives them shelter, he invites them to the wedding of his daughter Roslyn to Robb's uncle Edmure Tully, and in doing so, he activates the oldest, most inviolable protection the world of Westeros knows, and then he murders them. The setup is exquisite in its cruelty because the show takes its time. The wedding itself is played as a genuine relief. Edmure is nervous. Roslyn turns out to be beautiful, which surprises everyone, because the Frey women are not known for their beauty. There is music, there is wine. There is laughter. Catelyn watches her brother marry, and for a few minutes, the tension that has been building all season seems to ease. Robb has made mistakes. He broke his promise to marry a Frey daughter. He married Talisa instead, for love, and that choice cost him the Frey alliance. But here, now, in this hall, it seems like the breach is being mended. Edmure's marriage is the peace offering. The Freys and the Starks are allies again. The war can continue. The show gives you permission to relax. It wants you to relax. because what happens next only works if you are not braced for it. The doors close. The musicians stop playing their jaunty wedding songs and begin playing something else. Something slower. Something darker. The Rains of Castamere. Catelyn hears it. And this is the moment that destroys her, because she knows what that song means. The Rains of Castamere is the song of Tywin Lannister's victory over House Rain. It is the song about what happens to anyone who defies the Lannisters, and it is being played at a wedding between Tullys and Freys. Catelyn reaches out and grabs the sleeve of Roose Bolton, who is sitting beside her. She pulls it back, and underneath she sees chainmail. He is wearing armor, at a wedding, under his clothes, and in that instant, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, Catelyn Stark understands everything. She understands that this wedding is a trap. She understands that the Freys have betrayed them. She understands that Roose Bolton, one of Robb's own bannermen, is part of it. And she understands that she and her son are going to die. The violence begins. Lothar Frey steps forward and stabs Talisa in the stomach. Not once, repeatedly. And Talisa is pregnant. She is carrying Robb's child. The show has made sure you know this, has spent earlier scenes in the season establishing the pregnancy as a source of hope, as a sign that the Stark line will continue, that something good is growing in the middle of all this war. And now Lothar Frey is driving a knife into that hope, over and over, while Talisa falls to the floor. Crossbow bolts fly from the gallery above. Robb is hit, multiple times. He staggers but does not fall. His bannermen are being cut down around him. The Frey and Bolton soldiers are slaughtering men who were, moments ago, their guests. Men who were eating their food, drinking their wine, sleeping in their beds. Guest right is being violated on a scale that is almost incomprehensible, and the show forces you to watch every second of it. Catelyn grabs Walder Frey's young wife. She puts a knife to the girl's throat. She screams at Walder, begging him to let Robb go. Robb is her firstborn, her son. She has already lost one husband to this war. She has already believed, wrongly, that she has lost two of her other sons, Bran and Rickon, when Theon took Winterfell. And now she is watching Robb die in front of her, and she is holding a knife to a frightened girl's throat, and she is offering everything, anything, her own life in exchange for his, and Walder Frey sits there and says nothing that matters, because he never intended to let any of them leave. Roose Bolton walks up to Robb. Robb is on his knees, pierced with bolts, his wife dead on the floor in front of him, his child dead inside her. He looks up at Bolton, and Bolton says, "The Lannisters send their regards," and he drives a sword into Robb's heart. Catelyn screams. It is not a scream of anger. It is not a scream of defiance. It is the sound of a woman whose reason for living has just been removed from the world. She had 5 children, and she has now lost 3 of them, or believes she has. She had a husband, and he was murdered. She had a king, and he has just been stabbed through the heart. She draws the knife across the Frey girl's throat, and the gesture is empty. Not because the girl's life does not matter, but because Catelyn has already left. She is somewhere beyond bargaining, beyond strategy, beyond hope. She stands there, in the blood of a girl she just killed, and she waits. And then a Frey soldier steps up behind her and cuts her throat. The show holds on the aftermath. The hall is full of bodies. The music has stopped. There is only the sound of blood and silence. That is the Red Wedding. The thing that makes this sequence genuinely dark, the thing that separates it from mere plot shock, is the violation of guest right. Because guest right is not just a story mechanic. It is the foundation of civilization in Westeros. It is the thing that makes travel possible, that makes alliances possible, that makes peace possible. Without guest right, no lord can ever sit at another lord's table without wondering if the bread conceals poison and the wine conceals treachery. Walder Frey did not just kill Robb Stark. He killed the idea that a host's table is sacred, and in a world where winter is coming and the dead are rising beyond the wall, the destruction of that idea is a kind of apocalypse all by itself. The real-world impact was staggering. The episode drew over 5 million viewers during its initial airing. Social media exploded. Book readers who had known this was coming for over a decade watched with a kind of grim satisfaction as the unspoiled audience experienced what they had experienced years earlier while reading George R.R. Martin's A Storm of Swords. The Red Wedding became a cultural touchstone, a line of demarcation in television storytelling. Before the Red Wedding, Audiences still harbored the quiet assumption that narrative convention would protect the characters they loved. After it, that assumption was gone. There is something else about the Red Wedding that deserves attention: the music. Ramin Djawadi's score for the sequence is, in a strange way, one of the most restrained pieces of music in the show's history. There are no swelling strings, no dramatic crescendos. The music enters the scene before the violence begins, in the form of the Rains of Castamere, played by the musicians in the gallery. And then, as the killing starts, the score does not rise to meet it. It stays low, it stays quiet. It lets the screaming and the sound of steel and the crash of falling bodies do the work. And when Catelyn's throat is cut and she falls to the floor, the music stops entirely. There is nothing, just silence. And in that silence, the weight of what you have just witnessed settles on you like a stone. The show could have scored the Red Wedding as a massacre. It could have used the full force of the orchestra to match the scale of the violence. Instead, it chose restraint, and that restraint is what makes the sequence feel less like a set piece and more like a crime scene. You are not being entertained by the Red Wedding, you are witnessing it. And the show's refusal to give you the emotional cues that entertainment typically provides, the swelling music, the slow-motion heroism, the defiant last stand, is what makes the witnessing so unbearable. The show never lets you forget what happened at the Twins. In the very next episode, Misa, which aired on June 9, 2013, Walder Frey gloats about the massacre, and Roose Bolton is rewarded with the title of Warden of the North. The Freys sew Grey Wind's head, Robb's direwolf, onto Robb's body, and parade the grotesque figure through the camp. The desecration is total. Not just death, but mockery of death. Not just murder, but the deliberate erasure of dignity. And perhaps the darkest element of all is this: the Red Wedding was not committed by villains in the traditional sense. Walder Frey is not a monster. He is a bitter old man who was slighted by a boy king who broke a promise. Roose Bolton is not a demon. He is a cold pragmatist who saw which way the wind was blowing and chose the winning side. Tywin Lannister, who orchestrated the entire thing from hundreds of miles away, is not evil in the way Joffrey is evil. He is a man who calculated that a massacre at a wedding would end the war faster and with fewer total casualties than continuing to fight on the battlefield. Explain to me why it is more noble to kill 10,000 men in battle than a dozen at dinner, Tywin says later. And the terrible thing is, he has a point. The math works, the logic is sound, and that is what makes it so dark. Not that the Red Wedding was the work of madness, but that it was the work of reason. That is a distinction this show makes over and over. The worst things in Westeros are not done by people who have lost their minds. They are done by people who have done the math. But there are exceptions. There are characters in this world for whom cruelty is not a calculation. It is a vocation. Characters who do not weigh the costs and benefits of suffering, because suffering is not a means to an end for them. It is the end itself. And no character in the history of Game of Thrones embodies that more completely, more sickeningly, more unforgettably than Ramsay Bolton. The story of Ramsay Bolton and Theon Greyjoy is not a storyline. It is a sustained act of psychological demolition that stretches across 3 full seasons of television. And to understand why it belongs in any discussion of the show's darkest stories, you have to understand what Ramsay does to Theon. Not in summary, not in shorthand, in detail, because the detail is where the darkness lives. Theon Greyjoy arrives at Winterfell in Season 2 as a conqueror. He has betrayed the Starks, the family that raised him. He has seized their castle. He has executed Sir Roderick Castle. He has burned 2 farm boys and presented their charred bodies as the corpses of Bran and Rickon Stark. He has done terrible things. He is not sympathetic. The show has deliberately made sure of that. When Theon falls, when the Ironborn turn on him and hand him over to the Bolton forces, the audience feels something close to satisfaction. He deserved this. He had it coming. And that is exactly what the show wants you to feel, because what happens to Theon is so far beyond deserving that the concept loses all meaning, and the fact that you briefly thought he deserved it is part of the darkness. The show implicates you. It lets you enjoy his capture, his humiliation, his downfall, and then it shows you what justice actually looks like when it is administered by someone like Ramsay Bolton, and suddenly you cannot enjoy it anymore, and you have to sit with the discomfort of having wanted this. Ramsay first appears in Season 3, and the show plays a trick on you. Theon has been captured and is being tortured in a dungeon. He is strapped to a wooden cross. Men are pulling his fingernails out. They are asking him questions he does not know the answers to, and hurting him when he cannot respond. And then a boy appears. A servant. Someone who claims to have been sent by Theon's sister Yara. He helps Theon escape. He leads him through the darkness, points him toward freedom, and then he leads him right back to the same room. The escape was a game. The boy is Ramsay Snow, the bastard son of Roose Bolton. And the entire exercise, the hope, the flight, the desperate belief that someone was helping him, was designed to do one thing: to break Theon's spirit by showing him that hope itself is a weapon that can be used against him. That is not standard villain behavior. That is something far more sophisticated and far more disturbing. Ramsay does not just want Theon to suffer. He wants Theon to understand that suffering is the only thing that is real, that everything else, kindness, rescue, freedom, is a lie that exists to make the suffering worse. Over the course of Season 3, Ramsay systematically destroys Theon Greyjoy. He flays his fingers, not quickly, slowly, with precision, with conversation. He talks to Theon while he does it, in a friendly, almost casual voice, as if they are having a conversation over dinner. He plays guessing games. He tells Theon to guess where they are, who has captured him, why he is being tortured, and when Theon guesses correctly, Ramsay punishes him for it. When Theon guesses incorrectly, Ramsay punishes him for that too. The game has no rules. The game cannot be won. The game exists so that Theon understands that his choices do not matter, that his agency has been revoked. And then there is the castration. In the 7th episode of Season 3, The Bear and the Maiden Fair, which aired on May 12, 2013, Ramsay stages one of the cruelest psychological operations in the show's history. He sends 2 women to Theon's cell. They undress, they touch him, they tell him they have heard about him, heard that the Prince of the Iron Islands is well endowed, and they want him. And Theon, broken, exhausted, desperate for any human contact that is not pain, responds. He allows himself to feel something other than terror. For one brief, flickering moment, he is a person again. And then Ramsay walks in with a knife. And what he does next, the show mercifully does not show in full, but it makes the result unmistakable. Ramsay castrates Theon. He removes the part of him that, in Theon's own mind, defined his identity as a man, as a prince, as a person with power and desire and the ability to act on it. And then, in a later scene, Ramsay eats a sausage in front of him, grinning, making jokes, while Theon weeps. That is not violence. That is annihilation. Ramsay is not punishing Theon. He is not interrogating him. He is not extracting information. He is disassembling a human being, piece by piece, and replacing him with something else. Something empty. Something obedient. Something that answers to a new name. Reek. The transformation of Theon into Reek is one of the most disturbing character arcs in television history, because the show commits to it completely. By Season 4, Theon is gone. The man who swaggered into Winterfell, the man who tried to prove himself to a father who despised him, the man who made catastrophically bad decisions, but made them with the full force of his personality. That man has been erased. In his place is a creature who flinches at loud noises, who refers to himself in the third person, who bathes his torturer and calls him my lord, and means it. Not because he is pretending, because Ramsay has reached inside Theon's mind and rearranged the furniture. There is a scene in Season 4 where Roose Bolton tests Reek's loyalty by having Ramsay give him a straight razor and ordering him to shave Ramsay's face. This is a man who has been flayed, castrated, psychologically demolished, holding a blade to the throat of the person who did all of it to him. And he shaves him carefully, gently. He does not even consider cutting him, not because he lacks the opportunity, because Ramsay has done something to him that goes beyond fear. Theon does not obey Ramsay because he is afraid of what Ramsay will do if he disobeys. Theon obeys Ramsay because Theon no longer exists. Reek exists, and Reek knows his place. The show does not comment on this. It does not add music to tell you how to feel. It does not have another character walk in and say, "This is wrong." It just shows you a broken man shaving his torturer's face with a steady hand and dead eyes, and it lets you sit with it. Alfie Allen's performance across these seasons is one of the most remarkable things any actor has ever done on television. He does not play Theon's transformation as a gradual dimming. He plays it as a series of collapses. Each time Ramsay invents a new cruelty, you can see another piece of Theon fall away. And each time, the piece that remains adjusts, learns, adapts to its diminished state. The performance is so committed, so physically precise, that watching Theon in Season 2 and watching Rickon in Season 4 feels like watching two entirely different human beings. The posture is different. The eyes are different. The way he holds his hands is different. Alan rebuilt the character from the ground up, and the result is a portrait of trauma that is almost impossible to watch and equally impossible to look away from. The darkest aspect of the Theon and Ramsay storyline is not any individual act of torture. It is the duration, 3 seasons, years of story time. The show asks you to watch a human being be systematically unmade, week after week, month after month, and it never offers you the relief of a rescue. Not in Season 3, not in Season 4, not in most of Season 5. Theon's sister Yara attempts a rescue in the 6th episode of Season 4, The Laws of Gods and Men, which aired on May 11, 2014, and she fails. Not because she is not brave enough or strong enough, because Theon will not go with her. He fights her. He cowers. He screams that his name is Reek. She has come all this way, risked her men, crossed enemy territory, and when she finally reaches him, the brother she knew is not there anymore. The person in that cage does not want to be saved. Not because he does not want freedom, because he no longer understands what freedom is. That is the behavior of someone who has been tortured beyond the point where rescue is possible. That is the behavior of someone who has been so thoroughly broken that the cage has become the self. The person and the prison are the same thing now. Ramsay Bolton is, by any measure, the cruelest character Game of Thrones ever produced. Joffrey was cruel, but Joffrey was also stupid. His cruelty was impulsive, bratty, the tantrums of a vicious child who happened to have absolute power. Ramsay is different. Ramsay is intelligent. He plans his cruelties with the care of an artist. He understands psychology. He knows how hope works, how fear works, how identity works, and he uses that knowledge to break people with a precision that is genuinely chilling. And the show asks a question with Ramsay that it never quite answers, and perhaps never should. Where does someone like this come from? What makes a Ramsay? Is it the bastardy, the shame of being Roose Bolton's illegitimate son, the knowledge that he will never be a real Bolton no matter how hard he tries? Is it something innate, some broken wiring in the brain that makes cruelty pleasurable? Or is it Westeros itself, the system of power and inheritance and violence that rewards people like Ramsay, that gives them space to operate, that looks away when a bastard son tortures prisoners in his father's dungeons, because the prisoners are not important enough for anyone to care about? The show does not answer. It just shows you what Ramsay does, and it lets you decide. If this kind of deep dive is something you want more of, subscribing is the best way to make sure you do not miss what comes next. There is a fight in Season 4 of Game of Thrones that people remember wrong. They remember it as a tragedy. They remember it as a death. They remember the violence, the screaming, the sound that no viewer has ever been able to forget. But the thing most people miss about the death of Oberyn Martell is that it is not a tragedy in the classical sense. Oberyn does not fall because of fate. He does not fall because he is overmatched. He falls because he gets exactly what he wants, and it is not enough. He falls because justice, real justice, the kind that requires the guilty to confess and the world to acknowledge what happened, is not something you can take by force. Not even with a spear through a giant's chest. The episode is The Mountain and the Viper, Season 4, Episode 8. It aired on June 1st, 2014, written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and directed by Alex Graves. And the fight at its center is one of the most visceral sequences the show ever produced. But to understand why it belongs here, in a discussion of the darkest stories Game of Thrones ever told, you need to go back. Not just to the fight, to the story behind the fight, to Elia Martell. Elia Martell was the wife of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. She was a princess of Dorne. She was, by all accounts, gentle and kind, and loved by her family. During Robert's Rebellion, when the Targaryen dynasty fell, Tywin Lannister's forces sacked King's Landing. And during that sacking, Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, was set loose. He found Elia. He killed her children. Her infant son Aegon was torn from her arms and his head was dashed against the wall. Her daughter Rhaenys was, by most accounts from the source material, dragged from hiding and killed. And then the Mountain raped Elia. And then he killed her, with her children's blood still on his hands. The show reveals these details slowly, across multiple seasons, through the testimony of different characters. Oberyn Martell has known the truth for nearly 2 decades. He has carried it with him from Dorne to King's Landing, this burning, patient rage, waiting for the right moment. And when Tyrion Lannister is accused of murdering Joffrey and demands a trial by combat, and when Cersei names the Mountain as her champion, Oberyn sees his chance. Not just to fight, to extract a confession, to force the Mountain to say the names. Elia, Aegon, Rhaenys. To force him to say what he did, in front of the court, in front of witnesses, in front of the world. The fight itself is a masterpiece of choreography and tension. Oberyn is fast, fluid. He dances around the Mountain with a spear, striking from angles the larger man cannot defend, cutting him, weakening him, driving him back. And throughout the fight, Oberyn chants, "You raped her, you murdered her, you killed her children," over and over. A litany, a prayer, a demand. He is not just fighting. He is conducting a trial of his own. The combat is the method, but the confession is the goal. And Oberyn wins the fight. That is the part people forget. He drives his spear through the Mountain's body. He pins him to the ground. The Mountain is dying. The fight is over. Tyrion is saved. Oberyn has won. But he does not finish it, because finishing it is not enough. He needs the Mountain to confess. He needs to hear the words. He walks around the prone, bleeding giant, screaming at him to say her name, to say what he did, to acknowledge the crime that has gone unacknowledged for so many years. And in those few seconds of obsession, those few seconds where justice matters more than survival, the Mountain reaches up, hooks Oberyn's leg, and pulls him down. What happens next is one of the most graphic, most disturbing sequences in television history. The Mountain rolls on top of Oberyn. He drives his thumbs into Oberyn's eyes, and then, while Oberyn screams, while the crowd watches in horror, while Ellaria Sand, the woman who loves Oberyn, shrieks from the gallery, the Mountain crushes Oberyn's skull with his bare hands. And as he does it, he confesses. He says the words Oberyn wanted to hear. He says he killed the children. He says he raped Elia. He says he crushed her head. Just like this. The confession comes at the moment of death. Oberyn gets exactly what he wanted, and it costs him everything. That is the darkest kind of irony the show ever deployed. Oberyn Martell came to King's Landing seeking justice for a crime committed years earlier, a crime that had festered in Dorne like an open wound since the end of Robert's rebellion. He found the man who did it. He fought him, he beat him, and then he died, because justice was not enough. He needed acknowledgement. He needed the truth spoken aloud. And that need, that very human, very understandable need to have the world recognize what was done to his sister and her children, is what killed him. The Elia Martell story is one of the darkest in the entire show precisely because the show never shows it. You never see Elia die. You never see her children murdered. The horror exists entirely in testimony, in the words of characters describing what happened behind closed doors during the sack of King's Landing. And because you never see it, your imagination fills in the gaps. And your imagination is worse than anything the show could have filmed. The sound of a baby's head against a wall, the image of a young mother watching her children die before she herself is violated and killed. The show trusts you to understand the horror without depicting it, and that trust makes the horror more potent, not less. And then there is what the Mountain's crime reveals about the larger world of the show. Because the Mountain was never punished. Not for Elia, not for the children. Robert Baratheon became king, and Robert did not care. Robert did not want to think about what happened during the sacking of King's Landing, because thinking about it meant thinking about what his rebellion had cost, what it meant that the dynasty he overthrew was exterminated down to the infants. Tywin Lannister, who gave the order, was rewarded with a position as the most powerful man in the kingdom. The Mountain was given lands and titles. The perpetrators of one of the most horrifying acts of violence in the show's history walked free, prospered, and lived out their days in comfort. That is not a failure of the story. That is the story. The story of Elia Martell is the story of what happens when power decides that justice is inconvenient. When the people who could demand accountability choose instead to look away, because looking means confronting uncomfortable truths about the system they benefit from. Oberyn Martell spent years demanding that someone look, and when he finally forced the Mountain to speak the truth, it killed them both. Think about what that means. In the world of Game of Thrones, the truth is not just dangerous, it is lethal. Not because of magic, not because of some supernatural curse, Because the people who hold power have built a world where the truth is the one thing they cannot afford to let survive. The violence the mountain represents is not exceptional. It is systemic. Every war in Westeros produces its Elia Martells. Every sack of every city produces soldiers who do what the mountain did. The show never lets you forget this. Arya encounters the aftermath of the mountain's raids in the Riverlands. Brienne walks through villages that his men have burned. The small folk, the peasants and farmers and innkeepers of Westeros, live in a constant state of vulnerability to men like Gregor Clegane, men who are given permission to be monstrous by the lords who employ them. The mountain is not an aberration. He is a feature. But if the mountain represents the systemic violence that power enables, then King Joffrey Baratheon represents something different, something arguably worse, because Joffrey does not need power to enable his cruelty. Cruelty is the only thing Joffrey wants power for. There is a version of Joffrey that the show hints at in its earliest episodes, a prince, a golden-haired boy who walks with Sansa through the grounds of Winterfell and offers her his arm, a boy who smiles and says the right things, and seems, for a few brief moments, like the fairy tale prince that Sansa believes he is. And then the show peels that image away, layer by layer, scene by scene, until what remains is something that resists easy categorization. Not a villain, exactly, not a madman, a boy whose capacity for cruelty has never once been checked by consequence, and who has therefore never developed the ability to feel empathy, or the need to pretend. The darkness of Joffrey is not in any single act. It is in the pattern. It is in the accumulation. Each cruelty builds on the last, each one a little worse, each one revealing a little more of the void where a conscience should be. He forces Sansa to look at her father's severed head. He orders the execution of Robert's bastard children in a sequence in Season 2 that the show depicts with unflinching brutality. He orders a man's tongue cut out for singing a song he does not like. He forces one prostitute to beat another with a scepter while he watches with his crossbow raised. He threatens to rape Sansa at her own wedding to Tyrion. He is handed a rare book as a gift by Tyrion and immediately hacks it to pieces with his sword. None of these acts serve a strategic purpose. None of them advance his position. None of them make him more powerful or more secure. They are done because Joffrey enjoys them, and because no one around him has the power, or the courage, to stop him. Tyrion slaps him, once, and it is one of the most satisfying moments in the show. But it is only satisfying because it is so rare. The rest of the time, Joffrey is unchecked. His mother Cersei cannot control him. His grandfather Tywin terrifies him into temporary obedience, but cannot change what he is. His Kingsguard follows his orders because that is what Kingsguard do, even when those orders involve stripping a girl naked in front of the court and beating her with the flat of a sword. The scene with Ross is perhaps the purest distillation of Joffrey's darkness. In the 6th episode of Season 3, The Climb, which aired on May 5, 2013, Tyrion discovers that Ross, a prostitute who had been working as a spy for Littlefinger, has been given to Joffrey as a gift. What Tyrion sees, and what the show reveals to the audience, is Ross's body tied to Joffrey's bed, riddled with crossbow bolts. She is dead. Joffrey used her for target practice. And the show does not show you the act itself. It shows you the aftermath. It shows you Joffrey's room, the bed, the body, and it lets you reconstruct what happened. A young woman, tied to a bed, unable to move, while a teenage king fired bolt after bolt into her body because it pleased him to watch her die slowly. That is not the behavior of someone who has been corrupted by power. That is the behavior of someone for whom power is merely the mechanism that allows the corruption to express itself. Joffrey would be a torturer of animals even if he were a commoner's son. The crown did not make him cruel. The crown made his cruelty consequential. The show has a thesis about Joffrey that it never states outright, but demonstrates repeatedly. The most dangerous person in the world is not the strongest or the smartest. It is the most powerful person who is also the emptiest. Joffrey has no ideology. He has no vision for the kingdom. He has no loyalty, no love, no code. He is a vessel filled entirely with appetite, and the appetite is for suffering, other people's suffering. And because the system of inherited monarchy placed him on the Iron Throne through an accident of blood, because his mother's affair with Jaime produced a boy with golden hair and green eyes who could pass as Robert's heir, that appetite was given an army, a court, and a crown. The relief when Joffrey dies, poisoned at his own wedding in the 2nd episode of Season 4, The Lion and the Rose, which aired on April 13, 2014, is one of the most universally shared emotional experiences in the show's history. People cheered. They applauded. They felt something they rarely feel for a fictional death. Gratitude. Not just satisfaction. Genuine gratitude that this character was gone. That his cruelty had finally been stopped. That no more people would suffer because a boy with a crown found it amusing. And that reaction, that relief, that collective exhalation reveals something about the show's relationship with its audience. Game of Thrones does not just create dark moments, it creates the conditions under which light feels genuinely earned. Joffrey's death is cathartic only because his life was so relentlessly, specifically cruel. The darkness makes the relief possible. Without the one, you do not feel the other. But the show does not let you rest in that relief for long, because the world that produced Joffrey does not end when Joffrey dies. The Iron Throne does not become a kinder seat because a kinder boy sits on it. Tommen, sweet, gentle, easily manipulated Tommen, inherits the crown. And within 2 seasons, Tommen is dead too. Not murdered, self-destroyed. Driven to a window ledge by a mother whose love was indistinguishable from control. But that is a story for later. For now, sit with the darkness of Joffrey Baratheon. Sit with the fact that a boy with unlimited power and zero empathy is not a fantasy. It is a recurring feature of human history. The show set Joffrey in a medieval fantasy world, but the type is universal. The petty tyrant who finds pleasure in pain. The ruler who mistakes fear for respect. The child who never learned the word no, because everyone who might have taught it to him was afraid of what he would do if they tried. Joffrey is not the darkest thing in Game of Thrones, but he is the most recognizable, and sometimes, recognition is its own kind of horror. But Joffrey is only half of the story when it comes to the darkness of the Lannister family, because the other half lives in a man who would never stoop to Joffrey's crude cruelties, a man who would never personally fire a crossbow at a bound woman or force a girl to strip in court, a man who achieves his horrors through delegation, through strategy, through the cold application of power in service of a family name. Tywin Lannister, the man who orchestrated the Red Wedding from his desk, the man who ordered the Mountain to sack King's Landing, the man who spent his entire life building a legacy and spent an equal amount of time destroying his own son. The relationship between Tywin and Tyrion is one of the darkest through lines in the entire show because it operates on a frequency that is easy to miss if you are distracted by the spectacle. There are no explosions in Tywin's cruelty toward Tyrion, no battles, no wildfire, just the steady, decades-long erosion of a son's sense of self by a father who has decided that his son is a stain on the family name. Tywin hates Tyrion because Tyrion is a dwarf. That is the foundation. Everything else, the contempt, the disinheritance, the rigged trial, the death sentence, all of it rests on the simple, unforgivable fact that Tywin Lannister cannot accept that his bloodline produced a son who does not look the way a Lannister is supposed to look. Tyrion is brilliant. He is witty. He is politically gifted. He saved King's Landing during the Battle of the Blackwater. He served as Hand of the King with more competence than anyone who held the position before him, and none of it matters. None of it will ever matter, because Tywin looks at Tyrion and sees a body that embarrasses him, and no amount of achievement can overcome that shame. The show makes this explicit in a scene in the very first episode, Winter is Coming, which aired on April 17, 2011, when Tyrion visits Winterfell and speaks with Jon Snow. The two outcasts share a moment of honesty. Tyrion tells Jon to wear his bastard status like armor, so it can never be used to hurt him. It is good advice. It is also advice that Tyrion himself has never been able to follow, because the wound his father inflicts is too deep and too constant to be armored against. And then there is the death. The Children. Season 4, Episode 10. It aired on June 15, 2014. Written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and directed by Alex Graves. Tyrion has been freed from his death cell by Jaime, with the help of Varys. He is supposed to flee the city. He is supposed to disappear across the narrow sea and start a new life. But Tyrion does not go to the ship. He goes up, to the Tower of the Hand, to his father's chambers. He finds Shae first, in Tywin's bed, the woman who betrayed him at the trial, the woman whose testimony destroyed him, the woman he loved, is sleeping in his father's bed, and Tyrion strangles her. He wraps his hands around the throat of the woman he loved, and he kills her, and the show does not look away, and the act is not framed as heroic or justified or cathartic. It is framed as murder. The murder of a woman by a man who is drowning in rage and betrayal, and who has, in this moment, become something he did not want to become. And then he finds Tywin, on the privy, the most powerful man in Westeros, the man who orchestrated wars and weddings and massacres from his study, the man who controlled kings and commanded armies, is sitting on a toilet, and his son is standing in front of him with a crossbow. Tywin does what Tywin always does. He talks. He negotiates. He tells Tyrion that he was never going to let him be executed. He says they can discuss this reasonably. He uses the word reasonable, the way other people use a shield. And then he makes a mistake. He calls Shae a whore. And Tyrion tells him not to say that word. And Tywin, because Tywin cannot conceive of his son as a threat, because Tywin has spent 30 years treating Tyrion as something between a pet and a punchline, says it again. Tyrion fires. The bolt hits Tywin in the stomach. And Tywin looks at his son with an expression of genuine surprise. Not fear, surprise. Because even now, even with a crossbow bolt in his gut, Tywin Lannister cannot quite believe that the son he despised is the one who has destroyed him. The second bolt kills him. And Tyrion sits there, on the steps of the privy, and the look on his face is not triumph. It is not satisfaction. It is the look of a man who has done the thing he has wanted to do his entire life, and discovered that it tastes like ash. He killed his father. He killed the man who tormented him, who rigged his trial, who sentenced him to death, who took his lover, who never once, in 30 years, said the words that a son needs to hear from a father. And the killing did not fix it. It did not undo the damage. It did not fill the hole that Tywin spent decades carving. It just made Tyrion a kinslayer, a fugitive, and a man who will carry his father's contempt inside him like a stone for the rest of his life. The darkness of the Lannister family is not in any single act. It is in the pattern. Father destroys son, mother fails children, brother pushes child from window, sister arms fanatics and burns cities, nephew tortures for pleasure. The Lannisters are a family that has mistaken power for love and obedience for loyalty, and the result is a dynasty that consumes itself. Tywin built the Lannister legacy on fear and ruthlessness, and every one of his children learned the lesson he taught. Cersei learned to use power as a weapon, Jaime learned to sacrifice others to protect the family secret, and Tyrion learned that no amount of brilliance would ever earn his father's love. They are all Tywin's children, even the ones who killed him. And there is another death in the first season that serves as a dark mirror to all of this. A death so quiet, so seemingly minor, that most people remember it as a plot point rather than a tragedy. But it is a tragedy. A small, intimate tragedy that tells you everything you need to know about the world of Game of Thrones in the space of a single scene. The death of Lady, The King's Road, Season 1, Episode 2. It aired on April 24, 2011. Directed by Tim Van Patten and written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. In the episode, Arya's direwolf Nymeria bites Prince Joffrey after Joffrey threatens Arya with a sword. Arya drives Nymeria away to save her from punishment, but Cersei demands that a direwolf die. If Nymeria cannot be found, then Lady, Sansa's direwolf, will serve as substitute. Lady has done nothing wrong. Lady has hurt no one. Lady is a gentle wolf, as gentle as the girl she belongs to, and she is going to die because a queen is angry and a king is too weak to refuse his wife. Robert Baratheon, who should stop this, who has the power to stop this, who knows it is unjust, gives in. He lets Cersei have her way. And Ned Stark, because Ned is Ned, insists on doing it himself. He will not let a Lannister butcher carry out the sentence. If his daughter's wolf must die, he will be the one to do it. The scene where Ned kills Lady is quiet and devastating. Sansa is not present, but you feel her absence like a wound. Lady looks up at Ned with trusting eyes, because she has no reason not to trust him, because she is an animal, and she does not understand politics or vengeance or the cruelty of queens. She just knows that this is the man who belongs to the family she belongs to, and he puts a blade through her heart. That is the show's first lesson in the cost of injustice. Not the grand, dramatic injustice of a beheading or a massacre, the small, grinding injustice of a system where the powerful can demand blood from the innocent because their pride has been wounded. Lady dies because Joffrey lied about what happened with Arya. Lady dies because Cersei wanted revenge. Lady dies because Robert did not have the spine to say no. Lady dies because the system of power in Westeros does not have a mechanism for protecting the innocent when the powerful want them dead. Think about what that means for Sansa. Her wolf is killed in the second episode. Her father is killed in the 9th. The show draws a line between those two events. The line runs through justice, through the failure of justice, through the understanding that in this world, there is no court of appeal, no higher authority, no institution that will stand between the powerful and the powerless when the powerful decide to act. Lady's death is Ned's death in miniature. Both are killed because they are inconvenient to the Lannisters. Both are killed by a system that rewards cruelty and ignores innocence. And both deaths change Sansa. The first teaches her that the world is not the song she thought it was. The second teaches her that the world is not even the compromise she hoped it might be. The direwolves in Game of Thrones are more than pets. They are symbols. Each Stark child's direwolf represents something essential about the child's nature and fate. Grey Wind dies at the Red Wedding with Robb. Summer dies defending Bran at the cave. Shaggy Dog dies when Rickon is captured. Lady dies when Sansa's innocence dies. Nymeria is driven away, just as Arya is driven away from her family and her identity. Only Ghost survives, because Jon survives, and even Jon's survival comes at a terrible cost. The death of Lady is the smallest dark story in this video, but small does not mean insignificant. Small means specific, and specific is where the truth lives. The truth of Game of Thrones is not in the battles or the betrayals. It is in the quiet moments where a man kills a wolf because a queen is petty and a king is weak and the world has no room for innocent things. Now, let us continue. There is a scene at the end of the 5th season of Game of Thrones that nobody talks about the way they should. Not because it is obscure, because it is too uncomfortable, because the image it leaves in your mind is one of those images that refuses to fade, that surfaces unbidden when you are trying to think about something else, that makes you shift in your seat even years after you first saw it. Cersei Lannister walks naked through the streets of King's Landing, while a septa rings a bell behind her and chants the word shame. The episode is Mother's Mercy, Season 5, Episode 10. It aired on June 14, 2015. It was directed by David Nutter and written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. And the Walk of Atonement sequence is one of the most complexly dark moments the show ever produced, because the show forces you to feel sympathy for a woman you have spent 5 seasons despising. That is the trick. That is the cruelty. Not what happens to Cersei, what happens to you. By the time Cersei takes her walk, you have watched her do terrible things. She has conspired to murder her husband. She has raised a monster in Joffrey and protected him from every consequence. She has lied, manipulated, schemed, and destroyed lives with the casual efficiency of someone swatting flies. She has committed incest with her brother. She has armed the Faith militant to use as a weapon against the Tyrells, never imagining that the weapon might turn on her. She has been, by almost every metric the show offers, a villain. And now she is naked. Her head has been shaved. She is walking barefoot through streets that are slick with mud and filth, while the people of King's Landing, the people she has never thought of as people, crowd around her and scream. They throw things. Rotten food. Worse than rotten food. They call her names that cannot be repeated. They spit. They jeer. They expose themselves. The camera catches their faces, contorted with glee and malice, and the show asks you to notice something. These people are not administering justice. They are enjoying this. And that is the turn. Because in the moment you recognize the crowd's pleasure for what it is, you are forced to confront the fact that you have been part of that crowd. You have wanted Cersei to suffer. You have waited for it. You have anticipated the moment when her schemes would catch up to her and she would finally pay for everything she has done. And now it is happening, and it does not feel the way you expected it to feel. It feels ugly. It feels wrong. Not because Cersei is innocent, because the suffering is not proportional, and the audience for it, both within the show and in your living room, is taking pleasure in a woman's degradation, and that pleasure is exactly the kind of cruelty the show has been asking you to condemn in every other context. Lena Headey's performance in this sequence is devastating. She does not play Cersei as broken. She does not play her as defiant. She plays her as a woman who is concentrating on putting one foot in front of the other, who is using every ounce of will she possesses to not collapse, to not scream, to not give these people what they want. And by the end, when she reaches the Red Keep and falls into the arms of the massive, silent figure of Sir Robert Strong, the reanimated mountain, her feet are bleeding, her body is covered in filth, and her eyes are dry. She has not cried, not once. And you understand, in that moment, that this experience has not humbled Cersei, it has hardened her. The walk did not break her spirit. It forged it into something sharper and more dangerous than anything she has been before. The Walk of Atonement is dark because it works on multiple levels simultaneously. It is a depiction of systemic misogyny, the specific way that a patriarchal society punishes female sexuality. Cersei is not being walked naked through the streets because she conspired to murder her husband, or because she armed religious fanatics, or because she raised a king who tortured people for fun. She is being walked naked through the streets because she had sex. Specifically, because she confessed to having sex with her cousin Lancel Lannister. The institutional power of the faith has reduced all of her crimes, her real crimes, to a question of sexual morality, and the punishment is designed not to make her better, but to make her smaller. To remind her, and every woman watching, that female power can always be stripped away by stripping the woman bare. The show does not comment on this directly. It does not have a character turn to the camera and explain the gender dynamics at play, but the image speaks for itself. A powerful woman, naked, bleeding, surrounded by a mob that takes joy in her humiliation. That image exists in history. It has happened. It has happened many times, in many cultures, across many centuries. The show is not inventing a cruelty. It is depicting one that has deep roots in the real world. And what Cersei does in response to this humiliation is the second half of the darkness. Because Cersei does not forgive, she does not reform, she does not learn the lesson that the faith militant wants her to learn. She learns a different lesson. She learns that the only way to be safe is to make everyone who can hurt you disappear. Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter. It aired on June 26, 2016. It was directed by Miguel Sapochnik and written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. And the opening sequence of that episode is the single most beautifully constructed act of mass murder in television history. The scene begins with music. A piano. This is unusual. Game of Thrones almost never uses piano in its score. The instrument is anachronistic, out of place, and that displacement signals immediately that something is wrong. Something is different. Something unprecedented is about to happen. Cersei dresses in the Red Keep. She does not go to the Sept of Baelor for her trial. She stays home, and the camera moves between locations, building dread with the patience of a ticking bomb, showing you all the people who are gathering at the Sept. Margaery Tyrell, Loras Tyrell, Mace Tyrell, the High Sparrow, Lancel Lannister, Kevin Lannister. Dozens of the most powerful people in King's Landing, all in one building, all waiting for a trial that will never happen. Because beneath the Sept, in the tunnels and caverns under the city, candles are burning down to caches of wildfire, the green, liquid explosive that the Mad King Aerys once dreamed of using to burn King's Landing to the ground. Cersei has found his caches. She has placed them beneath the Sept, and as the candles gutter, as the green light begins to glow, Margaery Tyrell looks around the Sept and realizes that something is wrong. She is the only one who figures it out. She says they need to leave. She says they all need to leave right now. And the faith militant blocks the doors. The explosion is enormous. The Sept of Baelor, one of the most significant buildings in King's Landing, is vaporized. Everyone inside is killed. Margaery, Loras, Mace, the High Sparrow, Lancel, Kevin, hundreds of unnamed worshippers and clerics. Gone. In a column of green flame that can be seen across the entire city, and Cersei watches. From a window in the Red Keep, with a glass of wine in her hand, Cersei watches the Sept burn, and she smiles. Tommen sees it too. Tommen, her last surviving child, the boy she put on the throne. The boy who married Margaery, who loved Margaery, who trusted the High Sparrow. Tommen watches the explosion from his window, and then, without a word, without a dramatic speech, without any of the theatrics that other shows would have given the moment, he removes his crown, he sets it down, he walks to the window, and he steps out. The camera does not follow him down. It holds on the empty window, and then it cuts to Cersei's face, as she is told that her son is dead. And here is the darkest thing. Cersei does not collapse. She does not scream. She does not undo what she has done. She has her son's body burned because of course she does. Because Cersei will not let the faith have his body, will not let them bury him in their ruined Sept. She has him burned and his ashes placed in the same ground where the Sept once stood, and then she takes the Iron Throne for herself. Cersei Lannister becomes the first ruling queen of the Seven Kingdoms. She sits on the throne and looks out at a court that is silent with terror, and the expression on her face is not triumph. It is emptiness. It is the look of a woman who has destroyed everything, including her own son, and who has nothing left except power and the will to use it. The destruction of the Sept of Baelor is dark, not because of the body count, though the body count is staggering. It is dark because of what it says about the relationship between suffering and power. Cersei was humiliated. Cersei was stripped naked and paraded through the streets. Cersei was made to feel small and powerless and exposed, and her response was to commit an act of terrorism that killed hundreds of people, including people she supposedly cared about, in order to ensure that no one would ever make her feel that way again. That is not a villain's origin story. That is a human being's response to trauma, magnified by the fact that this particular human being has access to weapons of mass destruction. The Walk of Shame did not make Cersei a monster. Cersei was always capable of monstrous acts. What the Walk did was remove the last restraints, the last reasons to exercise caution, the last people whose opinions she cared about enough to moderate her behavior. After the Walk, Cersei has nothing to lose, and a Cersei with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing in the Seven Kingdoms. Think about the arc from the Walk to the explosion. Think about the straight line you can draw from a woman naked in the streets to a building full of people turned to ash. That line runs through shame, through rage, through the specific, grinding, suffocating fury of a woman who has been told her entire life that her power is conditional, that it depends on her father, her husband, her son, her beauty, her compliance, and who has finally decided that she will make her power unconditional by removing every person and every institution that ever had a claim on it. That is a very specific kind of darkness, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But Cersei's destruction of the Sept, for all its horror, has a logic to it. It is revenge. It is self-preservation. It is the cold calculation of a woman who has decided that the world will hurt her less if it is afraid of her. There are moments in Game of Thrones, however, where the darkness defies logic, where the horror is not strategic, or self-serving, or even comprehensible, where the show reaches into the absolute worst thing a human being can do and forces you to watch it happen, and there is no comfort in understanding why, because there is no why that is adequate to the act. The burning of Shireen Baratheon is one of those moments. It may be the darkest scene the show ever produced, not the most shocking, not the most violent, the darkest, because it involves a father, a child, and a fire, and because the show makes you watch a little girl burn alive while she calls for her parents. The episode is The Dance of Dragons, Season 5, Episode 9. It aired on June 7, 2015. It was written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss and directed by David Nutter. And what happens in it is something that the show's own cast and crew have struggled to discuss in the years since. Stannis Baratheon is marching his army toward Winterfell. He intends to take the castle from the Boltons. He intends to claim the North. He intends to press his claim to the Iron Throne, which he believes, correctly, is his by right of law, but his campaign is falling apart. Ramsay Bolton has sent a raiding party in the night that has destroyed Stannis' food supplies and siege equipment. A snowstorm has descended. His soldiers are freezing. His horses are dying. His sellswords are deserting. The army is trapped, and without a miracle, they will all die in the snow. Melisandre offers him a miracle. The Red Woman, the priestess of the Lord of Light, tells Stannis that there is a way. King's blood has power. She has shown him this before, burning leeches filled with royal blood, and watching as the names she spoke over the flames died one by one. Robb Stark, Joffrey Baratheon, Balon Greyjoy. The magic works, or at least, it appears to work. And now Melisandre tells Stannis that a greater sacrifice will produce a greater result. The snow will melt. The way will open. He will take Winterfell and the throne. The sacrifice she requires is Shireen. Shireen Baratheon is Stannis' only child. She is a young girl, perhaps 10 or 11. She has grayscale, a disease that has left half her face scarred and stiffened, and that nearly killed her as an infant. She is kind. She is bright. She taught Davos Seaworth to read. She loves her father, and she has told him so, plainly and without reservation, in one of the show's most quietly beautiful scenes. She went to him in his tent and said she wanted to help. She said she was the Princess Shireen of House Baratheon, and she was his daughter. And Stannis, a man who is not built for tenderness, who does not know how to show love in words, held her. He held his daughter, and you could see on his face that she was the only soft thing in his life. And now Melisandre is telling him to burn her. The show gives Stannis a choice. It makes that choice explicit. Davos Seaworth, Stannis' most loyal advisor, the man who has served him through every defeat and every compromise, would never allow this. So Stannis sends Davos away. He sends him to Castle Black to request supplies. And Davos goes, reluctantly, not understanding why Stannis is insisting, not knowing what Stannis is planning. Before he leaves, Davos visits Shireen. He gives her a carved stag, a toy he has been whittling for her. It is one of the most painful scenes in the show because you know what is coming, and Davos does not, and Shireen does not, and the carved stag in her hands represents everything that is about to be taken from her. The burning itself is almost unwatchable. Shireen is led to a pyre. She does not understand at first. She asks what is happening. She asks where she is going, and then she sees the stake. She sees the kindling. She sees Melisandre with her torch, and she understands, and she begins to scream. She screams for her father. She screams for her mother. She screams, "Please, father, please." And the sound of her voice, the sound of a child calling for the one person in the world who is supposed to protect her from everything, calling for him while he stands there and watches, is the most devastating sound the show ever produced. Stannis does not look away. The show does not tell you whether this is because he believes too strongly in what he is doing, or because he believes he owes his daughter the decency of witnessing what he has done to her. His face is stone. His eyes are wet. He stands there and watches his daughter burn. Selyse, Shireen's mother, who earlier in the season seemed supportive of Melisandre's methods, who seemed to care more about the Lord of Light than about her own child, breaks. She runs forward. She screams. She tries to reach the pyre. She is held back. The woman who showed her daughter so little warmth in life is destroyed by watching her die. And the camera does not cut away from the fire. It holds. The screams continue. And then they stop. And the silence that follows is the worst silence in the show. George R.R. Martin confirmed to the showrunners that Shireen's burning would happen in the books as well. This was not the show's invention. This was the author's plan. And the burning of Shireen is not gratuitous. It is the logical conclusion of Stannis' character. A man who has defined himself by duty, by law, by the belief that the ends justify the means. A man who burned heretics, who burned traitors, who listened to a red priestess and believed, genuinely believed, that the fires she lit were the fires of God. Shireen is not the first person Stannis has burned. She is the last. The final, most costly application of a principle that Stannis has been applying since the day he met Melisandre. And it does not work. The snow melts, but the army does not win. Stannis' sellswords desert him. Half his army disappears in the night. Selyse hangs herself. And when Stannis finally reaches Winterfell, his army is destroyed by the Bolton cavalry in minutes. He survives the battle only long enough to be found by Brienne of Tarth, who has been waiting for this moment, who swore an oath to avenge Renly Baratheon, Stannis' own brother, whom Stannis killed with shadow magic in Season 2. Brienne executes Stannis, and the man who burned his daughter for a crown dies in the mud without a crown, without an army, without a daughter, without anything. That is the full arc. That is the complete darkness of Shireen's story. A child loved her father loved her. And he burned her alive because a woman with red hair and a foreign god told him it would help him win a war. And it did not help. And he lost the war. And he lost his wife. And he lost his life. And his daughter died screaming for him in a fire that accomplished nothing. Let that sit for a moment. The burning of Shireen is the show's most devastating indictment of fanaticism. Not religious fanaticism specifically, though that is the surface reading. Fanaticism of purpose. The belief that your goal is so important, so necessary, so ordained, that any sacrifice is justified in its pursuit. Stannis does not burn Shireen because he does not love her. He burns her because he does love her, and he has convinced himself that his love for one child must be weighed against his duty to the realm, and the realm must win. That is the logic, that is the math, and the math is monstrous. The show is telling you something with Shireen's death that it has been telling you since the very first episode. The people who do the worst things in this world are not the people who have abandoned all principle. They are the people who have elevated one principle above all others, above mercy, above love, above the screaming of a child. Stannis did not lack conviction. He had too much of it, and his conviction burned his daughter alive. Subscribing takes only a moment, and it is the single best thing you can do to support this channel. There is a moment in Season 6 of Game of Thrones that does something no other moment in the show does. It reaches backward through time, Not metaphorically, literally. It takes a character you have known for 6 seasons, a gentle giant who says only one word, and it shows you the origin of that word, and the origin is a death sentence that has been echoing through decades, and the person who wrote it is the person you have been rooting for. The episode is called The Door, Season 6, Episode 5. It aired on May 22, 2016. It was written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and directed by Jack Bender, and the sequence at its climax is the single most emotionally devastating piece of storytelling the show ever attempted. Not the most violent, not the most shocking, the most sad. A sadness so deep and so specific that it rewrites everything you thought you knew about a character who never said more than one word. Hodor. His real name is Wylis. He was a stable boy at Winterfell. In Bran Stark's visions of the past, young Wylis is a normal boy. He speaks in full sentences, he smiles, he is sweet-natured and large for his age, and clearly well-liked by the people around him. He is a person. A whole, complete, functional person with a future ahead of him, and no reason to expect that future to be anything other than ordinary. And then Bran Stark destroys him. The sequence works like this. Bran is in a vision with the three-eyed raven, visiting the past, observing history. But in the present, the cave where Bran's physical body rests is under attack. The Night King has found them. The army of the dead is pouring in. Mira Reed is screaming at Bran to warg into Hodor, to take control of Hodor's body so that Hodor will carry Bran's paralyzed form to safety. Bran, still inside the vision, reaches out, and something goes wrong. He wargs into Hodor in the present, but the connection bleeds into the past. Young Wylis, decades ago, standing in the courtyard of Winterfell, suddenly feels it. Something is happening to him. Something is invading his mind. And through the connection, through the link that Bran has inadvertently created between the past and the present, young Wylis experiences his own future death. In the present, Hodor carries Bran through the tunnels of the cave. The dead are behind them. Mira runs ahead. They reach a door, a heavy wooden door that leads to the outside, to the snow, to escape, and Mira screams at Hodor to hold the door. Hold it shut. Keep the dead on the other side, while she drags Bran away. Hodor does. He presses his back against the door. The dead claw at it from the other side. They tear at the wood. They tear at his flesh. He holds. He holds with everything he has, because that is what he was told to do, and because some part of him, some remnant of the person he was, knows that this is what he exists for. And in the past, young Wylis collapses. His eyes roll back, he begins to seize, and he begins to say the words, "Hold the door, hold the door, hold the door," over and over, faster and faster, the phrase blurring and compressing until it becomes a single sound. Hodor, hold the door, Hodor. That is all he has ever said. That is all he will ever say, because the last command of his life reached backward through time and burned itself into his brain, and it erased everything else. Think about what that means. Think about what the show is telling you. Wylis was a boy with a life. He had thoughts and feelings and a voice, and Bran Stark's power, the power that was supposed to save the world, reached into that boy's mind and replaced everything with a single instruction. Hold the door. Wylis did not volunteer for this. He did not choose it. He did not understand it. He was a child, standing in a courtyard, and a force from the future invaded his consciousness and turned him into a tool, a vehicle, a body whose only purpose was to carry Bran Stark to the place where he would need to die. Hodor spent his entire life in service to the Starks. He carried Bran on his back across hundreds of miles. He was gentle and kind and afraid of thunder and loyal beyond all reason, and the show reveals that his loyalty was not a choice. It was brain damage. It was the result of a psychic assault committed by the person he served, decades before that person was even born. Hodor's entire life was the countdown to a death he experienced as a child. Every day, every moment, every time he said that one word, he was repeating the echo of his own destruction. That is not a twist. That is a tragedy so deep it changes the meaning of everything that came before it. Every scene with Hodor, every moment where he carried Bran, where he protected the Stark children, where he said his name and the other characters smiled because it was endearing, all of that is now colored by the knowledge that the word is a scar, that the gentleness was the aftermath of violence, that the loyalty was a prison. The show confirms something with this reveal that it has been suggesting for a long time. Bran's power is not benign. The ability to see through time, to warg into other minds, to touch the past and the future simultaneously, is not a gift. It is a weapon, and like all weapons, it causes damage. The damage it caused to Wyllis was total. It took a person and turned him into a function. Hold the door. That is all he is. That is all he was ever allowed to be. And the cruelest part is that Bran did not mean to do it. This was not a deliberate act. It was an accident, a side effect of his powers. He was trying to survive, trying to escape, and in the act of survival, he destroyed a human mind. He did not choose to turn Wyllis into Hodor. He did not weigh the costs. He did not make the terrible calculation that Stannis made with Shireen. He just reached out, and a boy fell down, and a life was erased. There is a specific kind of darkness in that. The darkness of collateral damage, the darkness of the unintended consequence. Bran Stark will go on to become the three-eyed raven, will go on to sit on the Iron Throne as king, will go on to be positioned as the endpoint of the entire story. And the foundation of that journey is the destruction of an innocent boy who happened to be standing in a courtyard at the wrong moment. Hodor did not die for a cause. He died because of a glitch, a crossed wire in the machinery of time travel, and his entire life, from the moment of his seizure to the moment of his death, was the slow unwinding of that glitch. The show never comes back to this. After Hodor dies, after he holds the door, no character sits down and reckons with what Bran did. Mira grieves. Bran continues his journey. The three-eyed raven's death is treated as a loss, but Hodor's death is treated as a sacrifice, and the word sacrifice implies a choice that was never made. Nobody chose this for Hodor except a frightened boy in a cave whose power exceeded his understanding. And the show just moves on. That silence is its own kind of darkness. The emotional weight of the hold the door sequence is unlike anything else in the show. It is not violent in the way the Red Wedding is violent. It is not cruel in the way Ramsay's torture is cruel. It is sad, profoundly, bone-deep sad. The kind of sad that makes you pull the covers up a little higher and think about the people in your own life who carry burdens they never chose. The people whose lives were shaped by forces they could not see and did not understand. The people who hold doors. But the show is not done with its darkness. Not by a long distance. Because the darkest stories in Game of Thrones are not always the ones that involve monsters or madmen or supernatural forces reaching through time. Sometimes the darkest stories are the ones about what happens to a person who is simply handed, over and over, to people who hurt them. And no character in the history of this show was handed to more people, or hurt by more of them, than Sansa Stark. There is a version of Sansa's story that is a fairy tale. A northern girl goes south to marry a prince. The prince turns out to be a monster. She escapes. She finds her way home. She reclaims her birthright. She becomes a queen. If you describe the arc in those terms, it sounds almost triumphant, almost redemptive, almost like the story of a girl who suffered and then won. But if you describe the specifics, if you sit with what actually happened to Sansa Stark across 8 seasons of television, the triumphant arc dissolves. What remains is a catalogue of cruelty so sustained, so varied, so relentless, that it becomes its own kind of horror. Not because any single moment is the worst thing the show ever did, but because the accumulation is. Sansa Stark begins the show as a girl who believes in songs. She believes in knights and princes, and the idea that the world rewards beauty and courtesy and goodness. She wants to go to King's Landing. She wants to marry Joffrey. She wants to be queen. And the show grants her wish, because the show understands that the cruelest thing you can do to a person is give them exactly what they ask for. In King's Landing, Sansa watches her father confess to crimes he did not commit. She watches Joffrey order his execution. She is forced to look at his severed head on a spike. She is stripped and beaten in front of the court by Joffrey's Kingsguard. She is married against her will to Tyrion Lannister, a man she does not know and does not love. She is suspected of regicide when Joffrey dies at his own wedding. She is smuggled out of the capital by Littlefinger, who has been manipulating her since the day they met, and whose interest in her is, the show makes clear, a twisted projection of his obsession with her dead mother. Littlefinger takes Sansa to the Eyrie, where she watches him push her Aunt Lysa through the moon door. He kisses her. She is a girl, and he is an older man who knew her mother, and the kiss is not affection. It is ownership. He is marking her, claiming her, integrating her into his plans because she is a Stark, because the Stark name has value, and because Littlefinger's only consistent quality is his ability to see value in people and exploit it. And then Littlefinger delivers Sansa to Ramsay Bolton. The episode is Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken, Season 5, Episode 6. It aired on May 17, 2015. It was written by Brian Cogman and directed by Jeremy Podeswa, and the final scene of the episode is one of the most controversial moments in the show's history. Sansa marries Ramsay. The wedding takes place in the Godswood of Winterfell, the castle where Sansa grew up, the castle that was once her home, the castle that is now occupied by the family that destroyed hers. She stands in the snow, in a white dress, and she marries the man whose father murdered her brother and mother at the Red Wedding. She does this because Littlefinger told her it was part of a plan, because she believed, or chose to believe, that marrying Ramsay would put her in a position to reclaim the North, because the alternative was to remain a fugitive, a pawn, a girl with a valuable name and no power to use it. After the wedding, Ramsay takes Sansa to his chambers, and what happens in that room is something the show depicts with a restraint that makes it worse, not better. The camera does not show Sansa, it shows Theon. It shows the face of the man who grew up with Sansa, who betrayed her family, who has been transformed by Ramsay into reek, as he is forced to stand in the corner and watch. And you hear Sansa's cries, you hear the sound of fabric tearing, you hear enough. The scene was met with enormous backlash. Critics, viewers, and even some of the show's own cast members questioned whether the scene was necessary, whether it served the story, whether it was gratuitous. The debate was fierce and in many ways unresolvable, because the question of whether depicting sexual violence on screen is ever justified is a question that does not have a clean answer. But within the world of the show, within the context of Sansa's story, the scene does something specific and terrible. It places Sansa's suffering in a continuum. Joffrey abused her, Littlefinger manipulated her, the system of arranged marriage treated her as a commodity, and now Ramsay, the cruelest person the show has ever created, has been given access to her body and her life, and the show makes you sit with the reality of what that means. Not in metaphor, not in euphemism, in the sound of a girl crying while a monster asserts ownership. The subsequent episodes of Season 5 and the early episodes of Season 6 depict Sansa's captivity in Winterfell with a grim, unflinching clarity. She is bruised. She is locked in her room. She is isolated from any potential ally. She is being systematically degraded by a man who has already demonstrated, with Theon, exactly how far his cruelty can go. And the show does not rush her escape. It does not give her a dramatic rescue scene in the next episode. It lets her suffer. It lets the weeks pass. It lets you understand that for Sansa, this is not a dramatic arc. It is daily life, a daily, grinding reality of abuse that has no end in sight. Sansa's escape from Winterfell, when it finally comes, is not triumphant. She and Theon jump from the walls of the castle into a snowdrift, and then they run. Through the snow, through the forest, pursued by Bolton men and dogs. And when Brienne of Tarth finally finds them and swears her service, Sansa accepts, and the words she speaks are formal and correct, and utterly devoid of the kind of joy that a rescue should bring. Because Sansa has been rescued before, by Littlefinger, and that rescue delivered her to Ramsay, she has learned that rescue is not salvation, it is a change of handler. The darkest aspect of Sansa's story is not any individual act of violence committed against her. It is the pattern, it is the way the show moves her from one abuser to the next, from Joffrey to Littlefinger to Ramsay, each one worse than the last, each one exploiting a different aspect of her vulnerability. And it is the way the show uses her suffering as the engine of her transformation. Sansa becomes strong because she suffers. She becomes strategic because she has been manipulated. She becomes a leader because she has been led by terrible people and learned, through pain, how power actually works. And there is something deeply uncomfortable about that narrative, because it suggests that suffering is educational, that trauma is a teacher, that the things that were done to Sansa are in some way responsible for the strength she eventually develops. And while the show may not endorse that reading explicitly, it does not refute it either. Sansa herself seems to accept it. In the final season, in a conversation with the Hound, she says something to the effect that, without Littlefinger, without Ramsay, without all of it, she would have stayed a little bird for the rest of her life. She attributes her strength to her suffering, and the show lets that stand. That is a thesis the show should have pushed back on harder, but the fact that it did not does not diminish the darkness of what happened to Sansa. It deepens it. because it suggests that in the world of Game of Thrones, the only way a woman can gain power is by being broken first. And while that may be an accurate description of the world the show depicts, it is a grim one, and it lingers. Sansa's story ends with her as queen in the north. She gets the crown, she gets the home, she gets the independence she has been fighting for since the day her father's head left his shoulders. And the show frames this as a victory, but victories in Game of Thrones are never clean. They always carry the weight of everything that was lost to achieve them. And when Sansa sits on her throne in the final episode, wearing a crown of direwolves, the camera catches her face, and it is not the face of a girl who believed in songs. It is the face of a woman who has survived things that would have destroyed most people, and who has paid for her survival with pieces of herself that she will never get back. That is the cost. That is the darkness that Sansa carries, not on her body, in her eyes. We are deep into the night now, and there is still more ground to cover. If the channel has earned your trust, a subscribe would mean a great deal. There is a scene in Season 5 of Game of Thrones that nobody was prepared for, not because the show had not been violent before, not because it had not been dark, because the scene took darkness to a place that felt, for the first time, genuinely hopeless. A place where the villain was not a person but a force, where the enemy could not be bargained with, could not be reasoned with, could not be understood. Where the dead stood up and opened their blue eyes, and the living realized, with a terror that went beyond fear into something like theological despair, that nothing they had ever fought about mattered. Hardhome, Season 5, Episode 8. It aired on May 31st, 2015. It was written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and directed by Miguel Sapochnik. It is one of the highest-rated episodes of the entire series on IMDb, with a 9.8 out of 10. And the reason people rate it so highly is not that it is the best written or the best acted episode. It is that it changes the show. It takes a program that has been, fundamentally, a political drama with fantasy elements and reveals that the fantasy elements are not decorative. They are existential. The setup is deceptively simple. Jon Snow sails to Hardhome, a settlement on the coast beyond the Wall, to convince the free folk, the wildlings, to come south. The Night's Watch and the wildlings have been enemies for thousands of years. The wildlings have been fighting to get south of the Wall. The Night's Watch has been fighting to keep them out. And now Jon Snow, the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, is standing in front of a hall full of people who hate him, asking them to trust him, because something is coming, something that does not care about the politics of the Wall or the grudges between the Watch and the free folk. Something that makes every human conflict in the show look like children arguing over a toy while the house burns down. The army of the dead arrives without warning. One moment, the free folk are debating Jon's offer. The next, an avalanche of snow comes crashing down the mountainside, and behind it, a silence. And then the screaming starts. What follows is approximately 20 minutes of sustained, escalating horror. The dead attack Hardhome, not in waves, in a flood. They pour over the palisade walls. They crash through gates. They swarm through buildings. And they do not stop. They cannot stop. Because they are already dead, and the dead do not tire, do not fear, do not retreat. They are not an army in any meaningful sense. They are a natural disaster wearing the faces of people who were alive 5 minutes ago. The battle sequence is extraordinary in its filmmaking. But what makes it dark, what earns it a place in this discussion, is not the spectacle. It is the moment near the end, after the battle is lost, after the living have fled to the boats, after Jon Snow looks back at the shore from the deck of his ship. The Night King walks to the edge of the dock. He is tall and gaunt and crowned with ice. He looks at Jon. He does not speak. He does not need to. He simply raises his arms. And the dead rise. Every person who died in the battle. Every man, woman, and child who fell to the whites in the last 20 minutes. They stand up. Their eyes open blue. And they join the army that just killed them, the army that just destroyed Hardhome. The people who were alive and fighting moments ago are now weapons pointed at the survivors. Jon watches, and on his face is something the show has never shown on any character before. Not fear, not anger, not determination, despair. The absolute, bone-deep understanding that this enemy cannot be defeated by any means he knows. Because every soldier you lose becomes a soldier for the other side. Every battle you fight, even the ones you win, strengthens the enemy. The math is not just bad. The math is impossible. That is the darkness of the Night King and the army of the dead. Not the violence. The math. The absolute, inescapable arithmetic of a war where the losing side's casualties become the winning side's reinforcements. In any normal war, both sides get weaker as the fighting continues. In this war, one side gets stronger. Every person who dies, regardless of whether they die fighting bravely or hiding in a corner, becomes a weapon. Death itself is the enemy's supply chain. The show uses Hardhome to reframe everything that has come before. Every war, every political machination, every betrayal and alliance and marriage pact and assassination, all of it was happening while this threat was growing beyond the wall. The Starks and the Lannisters were fighting over a throne, while an army that does not sleep, does not eat, does not feel pain, was marching south. And the audience, watching from the comfort of their own political engagement with the show, their own investment in who sits on the Iron Throne, suddenly has to reckon with the possibility that none of it mattered, that the Game of Thrones, the game the show is named after, is the distraction. The real story is the wall of ice in the north, and the thing that is coming through it. Hardhome is dark because it introduces a kind of darkness that the show has only hinted at before. Cosmic darkness. The darkness of a universe where the dead can be weaponized. Where death is not the end but a recruitment tool. Where the concept of an afterlife is replaced by the concept of an after-army. There is something deeply, fundamentally wrong about the dead rising. Not wrong in a plot sense, wrong in a spiritual sense. The dead are supposed to stay dead. That is one of the foundational rules of existence. And the Night King breaks that rule with a gesture, and the entire world of the show reshapes itself around the breach. The image that stays with people, the image that makes Hardhome the episode that non-watchers have heard about, is that final shot. Jon on the boat, the Night King on the shore, the dead rising behind him. No words, no dialogue, just the silent promise that everything Jon has seen is coming south. And the wall of ice that has protected the Seven Kingdoms for thousands of years is not going to hold. That promise hangs over the rest of the show. Through seasons 6, 7, and 8, the audience carries the weight of Hardhome. Every political scene, every moment of human drama, is now colored by the knowledge that the dead are coming. And the characters who do not know this, who are still playing the Game of Thrones, who are still fighting over castles and titles and claims, seem smaller. Not less interesting, smaller. Because the audience has seen what Jon has seen, and they know that the game does not matter. Not against that, not against an enemy that turns your dead into soldiers and your defeats into reinforcements. The show will eventually resolve the threat of the Night King, in Season 8, in a way that many viewers found unsatisfying. The Night King is killed by Arya Stark in a single blow during the Battle of Winterfell. The army of the dead collapses. The existential threat that Hardhome introduced is resolved in a single episode, and the remaining episodes return to the question of who sits on the Iron Throne. And for many viewers, that return felt like a betrayal, like the show introduced the most terrifying enemy in its history and then disposed of it to make room for more politics. But that is a debate about the show's ending, and this video is about its darkness. And the darkness of Hardhome is not diminished by how the story ends. The darkness of Hardhome is in the moment, in the 20 minutes of sustained horror, in the Night King's arms rising, in the dead's eyes opening, in Jon Snow's face as he realizes that everything he thought he knew about war is wrong. That darkness does not need a satisfying resolution to be effective. It does not need the Night King to win for the horror to land. The horror is in the possibility, in the knowledge that in this world, the dead can rise. And once you have seen that, once you have sat with that, the world of the show is never the same. There is a detail about Hardhome that people tend to overlook, but it is essential to the darkness. The wildlings who were convinced to join Jon, the ones who were inside the gates when the dead arrived, were a fraction of the people at Hardhome. Thousands more were outside the palisade, on the beach, in the settlements beyond the walls. When the gates closed, those people were left outside, and they died, and they rose, and they became the enemy. The show does not linger on this. It does not give you a montage of the abandoned wildlings pleading at the gates. It just closes the gates. And in that closing, in that simple logistical decision, there is a darkness that has nothing to do with the supernatural. It is the darkness of triage, the darkness of choosing who lives and who dies based on proximity and luck. The people inside the gates are not better than the people outside. They are not braver or more deserving, they are just closer to the exit. And the people who are farther away die screaming, while the people who are closer sail away on boats. That is war. Not the heroic version of war that Robb Stark believed in, not the strategic version that Tywin Lannister practiced. The real version, The version where survival is determined by geography and chance, and the dead are not honored or mourned, they are just left behind. Hardhome strips away every romantic illusion about conflict that the show has ever entertained, and replaces it with something bleak and true. In the real calculus of survival, most people are on the wrong side of the gate, and the people on the right side do not look back. The Night King understands this. That is what makes him so terrifying. He is not angry. He is not vengeful. He does not hate the living. He simply understands that the math favors him. Every battle makes him stronger. Every day that passes adds bodies to his army. He does not need to win battles. He just needs the living to keep dying, which they will, because that is what living things do. The Night King's strategy is patience. His weapon is time, and his army is composed of everyone who has ever lost. There is something profoundly nihilistic about the army of the dead, and the show knows it. The Night King is the show's only truly existential villain. Every other antagonist in Game of Thrones, no matter how cruel, is human. They want something: power, revenge, survival, recognition. The Night King wants nothing. He is not trying to build a kingdom. He is not trying to right a wrong. He is trying to end the story. All stories, every story. He is the darkness at the end of the sentence, the silence after the last word, the cold that comes when the fire goes out. And the show defeated him in a single episode. And that, too, is a kind of darkness. The darkness of anticlimax. The darkness of spending 3 seasons dreading an enemy that turns out to be solvable. The darkness of realizing that the show you are watching may not be equal to the threat it created. That is a meta-darkness, a darkness about the show rather than within it, but it belongs in this discussion because it shaped how millions of people experienced the final season. The Night King's death in The Long Night, the 3rd episode of Season 8, which aired on April 28, 2019, was supposed to be the resolution of the show's largest existential question. And for many viewers, it felt like the question was dismissed rather than answered. But again, this video is not about the show's structural choices. It is about the darkness those choices contained. And Hardhome, regardless of what came after, remains the purest expression of existential horror that Game of Thrones ever achieved. Let us press on. That specific kind of darkness, the darkness of a threat so large it renders human concerns irrelevant, connects to the final dark story we need to discuss. Because the show's ultimate act of darkness is not committed by the dead. It is not committed by a villain. It is committed by the character who was supposed to save the world. The character who spent 8 seasons freeing slaves, burning tyrants, and promising that she would break the wheel of power that crushed the common people of Westeros beneath its spokes. Daenerys Targaryen burns King's Landing. She burns all of it. And the people who trusted her, the audience who loved her, the characters who followed her across oceans, have to watch. The episode is The Bells, Season 8, Episode 5. It aired on May 12, 2019. It was written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and directed by Miguel Sapochnik. It drew approximately 12.5 million viewers during its initial broadcast, and it is, depending on who you ask, either the boldest storytelling decision the show ever made, or the most catastrophic narrative failure in the history of prestige television. This video is not interested in that debate. This video is interested in the darkness, and the darkness of The Bells is absolute. The episode begins with Varys, the Spider, the man who has served kings and queens for decades, whose only consistent loyalty has been to the people, to the realm, to the idea that the small folk deserve a ruler who cares about them. Varys has discovered the truth about Jon Snow. He knows that Jon is Aegon Targaryen, the true heir to the Iron Throne, and he has begun writing letters, sending ravens, trying to spread the word. Because Varys has been watching Daenerys, and what he sees frightens him. Daenerys has lost everything. She has lost Jorah Mormont, her oldest friend, who died protecting her during the Battle of Winterfell. She has lost Rhaegal, her dragon, shot from the sky by Euron Greyjoy's scorpion bolts. She has lost Missandei, her closest confidant, beheaded on the walls of King's Landing by the Mountain on Cersei's orders. She has lost the love of Jon Snow, who has pulled away from her since learning the truth about his parentage. She has lost the trust of Tyrion, who keeps counseling restraint, who keeps urging her to be merciful, who keeps failing to understand that mercy has cost Daenerys everything. And she is alone. For the first time since she walked into a fire and emerged with 3 dragons, Daenerys Targaryen is alone. The people around her are afraid of her. The man she loves cannot look at her without seeing his aunt. The advisors she trusted have failed her repeatedly. And the throne she has been fighting for since the first episode is right there, across the bay, behind the walls of a city full of people she has never met. Varys is executed. Daenerys discovers his treason and has Drogon burn him alive on the beach at Dragonstone. And the show lingers on the execution, on the flames reflected in the dark water, on Varys's face as he dies. He does not beg. He does not plead. He says he hopes he was wrong. And the thing is, you know he was not wrong. You can see it in Daenerys' eyes. The warmth is gone. The idealism is gone. What remains is something harder and colder and more dangerous than anything the show has put in those eyes before. The battle for King's Landing begins. Drogon destroys the Iron Fleet. He melts the Scorpion bolts. He burns the Golden Company. He punches through the city walls. The Lannister soldiers throw down their swords. The people of King's Landing do not want to fight. They want to survive. And from every corner of the city, from the towers and the walls and the streets, the bells begin to ring. The bells mean surrender. Tyrion told Daenerys this. He begged her. If the bells ring, it means the city has given up. It means the fighting is over. It means the people have chosen to live. The bells ring, the city surrenders. And Daenerys sits on Drogon, high above the Red Keep, and she makes a choice. She does not accept the surrender. She turns Drogon toward the city, and she burns it. Not the Red Keep, not Cersei's stronghold, the city, the streets, the houses, the markets, the people, thousands of people, tens of thousands, women and children and old men and merchants and beggars and everyone who could not get out of the way. Drogon sweeps back and forth across King's Landing, and fire pours from his jaws, and the buildings explode, and the people run, and they cannot run fast enough, and they burn. The show forces you to watch. It puts you on the ground with the civilians. It shows you mothers holding children. It shows you people trying to hide in buildings that are about to collapse. It shows you the Hound and Arya running through streets that are turning to ash. It shows you Tyrion's face as he realizes what is happening. It shows you Jon Snow, who fought his way into the city expecting a battle and is now watching a massacre, screaming at his soldiers to fall back, to stop fighting, to get away from the fire. And it shows you Daenerys, on Drogon, above the city, and her face is not the face of a madwoman. It is the face of a woman who has decided, who has calculated, who has looked at the cost and the benefit and chosen fire, not because she has lost her mind, because she has lost everything else, her love, her friends, her trust in the people around her, her belief that she can rule through anything other than fear. She said it herself, episodes earlier, let it be fear, and now it is fear, and the fear is fire, and the fire is everywhere. The destruction of King's Landing is the darkest moment in Game of Thrones because it implicates the audience. For 8 seasons, the audience loved Daenerys. They cheered when she freed the slaves of Astapor. They cheered when she crucified the masters of Meereen. They cheered when she burned the halls in the temple of the Dosh Khaleen. They cheered when she used fire as a tool of liberation, as a weapon of justice, as the instrument of a righteous cause. And the show asks, now, in its final hours, whether the cheering was warranted, whether the audience was paying attention, whether the woman who burned slavers and the woman who burned civilians are different people, or the same person in different circumstances. The signs were always there. The show tells you so. Daenerys' first instinct, in almost every situation, was fire. When she was crossed, she burned. When she was defied, she burned. When she felt powerless, she burned. The burning was always the constant. What changed was the context. In Essos, the people she burned were slavers and tyrants, and the audience applauded. In King's Landing, the people she burns are civilians, and the audience is horrified. But the impulse is the same. The fire is the same. The only thing that changed is who is standing in the flames. That is a deeply uncomfortable realization, and the show does not soften it. It does not give you an escape. It does not offer the comfort of madness, of Targaryen insanity, of a medical explanation that absolves Daenerys and, by extension, absolves you. The show simply shows you what Daenerys does. And it asks you to reckon with the fact that you loved her while she was doing it, as long as the people she was doing it to were people you did not care about. The aftermath of the burning of King's Landing is the final few hours of the show. Tyrion walks through the ashes. He finds the bodies of Jaime and Cersei buried under the rubble of the Red Keep. He weeps. Jon walks through the streets and sees the scale of the destruction. He sees what Daenerys has done to the city, to the people, to the idea that a better world was possible, and he makes his own terrible choice. He goes to Daenerys, and he kills her. He puts a knife in her heart while he kisses her, and the Mother of Dragons dies in the throne room, surrounded by ash and snow, with the Iron Throne melting behind her as Drogon's fire reduces it to a puddle of molten steel. The show ends with Bran Stark on a throne that is not the Iron Throne, with Sansa as queen in the north, with Arya sailing west, with Jon heading north, beyond the wall, back to the only place he ever felt he belonged. The wheel is not broken, it is just smaller, and the city that Aegon the Conqueror built 300 years ago is a ruin, and the woman who meant to liberate it is dead, and the people who loved her have to live with what she became. But before we reach that final darkness, there are stories we have not yet told, stories that sit in the margins of the larger narrative, quieter than the Red Wedding, less spectacular than the burning of King's Landing, but no less dark. And sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that cut the deepest. There is a moment at the very end of the very first episode of Game of Thrones that most people remember as the hook, the cliffhanger, the thing that made them come back for episode 2. But if you sit with it, if you strip away the narrative function and look at what actually happens, it is one of the most disturbing things the show ever depicted, because it involves a child, and it involves a choice made in 3 seconds that will echo through 8 seasons of television. The episode is Winter is Coming, Season 1, Episode 1. It aired on April 17, 2011. It was directed by Tim Van Patten and written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. And in its final moments, a boy named Bran Stark climbs a tower in Winterfell because climbing is what Bran does. His mother has told him not to. His father has told him to be careful. But Bran is a boy, and boys climb, and the broken tower is there, and the window at the top is open. Through the window, Bran sees Jaime Lannister and Cersei Lannister having sex, brother and sister, the Queen of the Seven Kingdoms and the greatest swordsman in Westeros, in an act that, if discovered, would destroy the Lannister family, delegitimize the royal children, and almost certainly result in both their deaths. Bran does not understand what he is seeing. He is a child. He looks, and Cersei sees him looking, and she gasps, and Jaime turns. And Jaime looks at this boy, this child, and he says, "The things I do for love," and he pushes Bran out of the window. The fall does not kill Bran. It paralyzes him. He will never walk again. A boy who loved to climb will spend the rest of his life being carried. And the man who did this to him, the man who shattered his spine and stole his legs, will spend the next 7 seasons on a journey of redemption that the audience will, for the most part, embrace. Jaime Lannister will become one of the show's most beloved characters. He will save Brienne of Tarth. He will lose his sword hand and find his honor. He will fight the dead at Winterfell, and people will love him for it. But the show never lets you fully forget what Jaime did in that tower. The thing people sometimes overlook about the scene is not the push itself. It is the casualness of it. Jaime does not agonize. He does not weigh his options. He does not consult Cersei. He looks at a child, calculates the risk, and throws him from a window with the same ease that another man might swat a fly. The things I do for love is delivered as a quip, a joke. The attempted murder of a child is, for Jaime Lannister in this moment, not a moral crisis. It is an inconvenience. That casualness is the darkness, not the violence, the casualness. The show is telling you, in its very first episode, that this is a world where a knight can throw a child from a tower and crack a joke about it, where the life of a boy means less than the secret of an affair, where the most basic moral prohibition, do not harm children, is a guideline that powerful people discard when it becomes inconvenient. And the show goes further. Because Bran survives the fall, an assassin is sent to finish the job. A man with a Valyrian steel dagger enters Bran's room while he lies unconscious, and only the intervention of Bran's direwolf, Summer, and his mother Catelyn prevents the assassination. The show never fully confirms who sent the assassin, though the characters suspect the Lannisters, and Littlefinger's lies about the dagger's ownership are what set the central conflict in motion. Catelyn's investigation leads her to arrest Tyrion. Tyrion's arrest leads to war. The war leads to the death of Ned Stark, the Red Wedding, the destruction of the Stark family, and everything that follows. All of it. Every death, every betrayal, every burned city and broken oath and severed head. All of it traces back to a moment where a man pushed a boy out of a window because the boy saw something he should not have seen. The darkness of Game of Thrones begins with the casual destruction of a child's body and a child's future, and the entire show unfurls from that act like a bloodstain spreading across white cloth. If you have made it this far, you are exactly the kind of viewer we make these for. Consider subscribing so you never miss one. There is another origin story in the first season that most people process as backstory and then move past. The story of Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen. The story of a brother who sold his sister to a stranger for an army. And the story of what that sale reveals about the world these characters inhabit. The show introduces Daenerys in the very first episode. She is standing in a room in Pentos, the free city across the narrow sea, being prepared for a meeting. Her brother Viserys is inspecting her, touching her, telling her to stand up straight, telling her to be beautiful. The camera lingers on Daenerys' face, and what you see there is not shyness or excitement. It is fear. The dull, practiced fear of someone who has been living with an abuser for so long that the fear has become a kind of muscle memory. She does not flinch, she does not fight. She stands perfectly still and lets her brother examine her body, because she has learned that stillness is safer than resistance. Viserys has arranged for Daenerys to marry Khal Drogo, the leader of a Dothraki Khalasar, 40,000 warriors strong. In exchange for Daenerys, Drogo will give Viserys the army he needs to cross the sea and retake the Iron Throne. This is the deal. A sister for an army, a human being for a political alliance. And the show presents it plainly, without commentary, without editorializing. A man handed his own sister to a stranger in exchange for soldiers, and the show lets you sit with how ordinary everyone treats it. Think about that for a second. Viserys does not even have the decency to frame it as sacrifice. He does not tell Daenerys that he is sorry. He does not tell her that it is necessary. He tells her that he would let 40,000 men and their horses have her if it got him his crown. He says those words to his sister, to a girl who is, at this point in the story, barely more than a child. And the show lets the words land without softening them, without cutting away, without giving you the comfort of thinking he does not mean it. He means it. That is the whole story. Daenerys' wedding night with Drogo is depicted in the show's first episode with a rawness that established the show's willingness to depict what other shows would not. Daenerys is crying. She is alone with a man she does not know, who does not speak her language, who is massive and frightening and completely uninterested in her consent. The scene establishes the foundational trauma of Daenerys' story. She does not begin as a conqueror. She does not begin as a queen. She begins as property, as currency, as a body that was traded for its strategic value by the one person in the world who should have protected her. Viserys' death, when it comes in the 6th episode of Season 1, A Golden Crown, which aired on May 22, 2011, is one of the show's first moments of cathartic violence. Viserys, drunk and furious, storms into a Dothraki feast and draws a sword, which is forbidden in the sacred city of Vaes Dothrak. He threatens Daenerys and her unborn child. He demands his crown, and Drogo gives him one. He melts gold medallions in a pot and pours the molten metal over Viserys' head. Viserys screams. He dies, and Daenerys watches, and what crosses her face is not horror. It is not grief. It is recognition. He was no dragon, she says. Fire cannot kill a dragon. In that moment, Daenerys is not mourning her brother. She is shedding him. She is recognizing, perhaps for the first time, that the person who controlled her, who abused her, who sold her, was never the powerful figure he pretended to be. He was a weak man with a loud voice and a family name, and now he is dead, and she is alive, and the Khalasar is hers, and the road to the Iron Throne does not run through Viserys Targaryen anymore. It runs through her. The darkness of the Viserys story is not just in his cruelty to Daenerys. It is in what it reveals about the world of the show. In Westeros and in the free cities, selling a woman into marriage for political advantage is not an aberration. It is the system. Cersei was married to Robert for a political alliance. Sansa will be married to Joffrey, then to Tyrion, then to Ramsay, all for political advantage. Marjorie Tyrell is married to Renly, then to Joffrey, then to Tommen, each time because the alliance serves her family's interests. Women in this world are currency. They are traded between houses the way other assets are traded. Their bodies, their fertility, their capacity to produce heirs, these are the things that give them value in the eyes of the men who hold power. The show depicts this system with an unflinching clarity that many viewers found uncomfortable, but the discomfort is the point. Because the system is not fantasy, it is history. For most of human civilization, women were traded in marriage for political, economic, and military advantage. Daenerys being sold to Drogo is not a fantasy invention. It is a depiction of a practice that defined the lives of real women for thousands of years. And the fact that it is disturbing to watch is exactly the reaction the show is designed to produce. You should be disturbed. The show is showing you something real, dressed in the costume of dragons and Dothraki, and asking you to see it for what it is. The deepest darkness of Viserys and Daenerys' story is in the connection between the beginning and the end. Daenerys begins as a victim of a system that treats women as property. She rises, she frees slaves, she conquers cities, she breaks chains, she becomes the most powerful person in the world. And then she burns a city full of innocent people to the ground. The girl who was sold by her brother becomes the woman who destroys King's Landing. And the show asks whether the journey from one to the other is a corruption or a completion. Whether the violence that was done to Daenerys created the violence she eventually inflicts. Whether the cycle of abuse and power that began with Viserys pouring molten gold ends with Daenerys pouring dragonfire. There is no clean answer, and the absence of a clean answer is, itself, a kind of darkness. There is another trial we need to discuss. Another moment where the show takes a character you care about and shows you the exact point where hope dies. Not in a battle, not in a betrayal, in a courtroom, in a speech, in the silence after a man tells the truth and realizes that the truth does not matter. The episode is The Laws of Gods and Men, Season 4, Episode 6. It aired on May 11, 2014. It was written by Brian Cogman and directed by Alex Sakharov, and the final act of the episode contains what may be Peter Dinklage's finest performance in the entire series, which, given the caliber of his work across 8 seasons, is a statement that carries considerable weight. Tyrion Lannister is on trial for the murder of King Joffrey. He did not do it. The audience knows he did not do it. Tyrion knows he did not do it. And as the trial proceeds, it becomes increasingly, sickeningly clear that the outcome has already been decided. The witnesses have been coached. The evidence has been shaped. The judges, Tywin Lannister chief among them, have already reached their verdict. The trial is not a search for truth. It is a performance. A ritual designed to give the appearance of justice while delivering a predetermined result. One by one, the witnesses testify. They take things Tyrion said and strip them of context. They take moments of kindness and reframe them as evidence of malice. They take his sharp tongue, his wit, his habit of saying uncomfortable truths in rooms full of powerful people, and they weaponize it. Everything Tyrion has ever said that was clever, that was brave, that was honest, is turned against him. The very qualities that made the audience love him are presented as proof of his guilt. And then Shae takes the stand. Shae, the woman Tyrion loved. The woman he tried to protect by sending her away from King's Landing. The woman who, instead of leaving, was turned into a weapon against him. She testifies against Tyrion. She tells the court intimate details about their relationship. She calls him my lion. She says he planned the murder with Sansa Stark. And every word is a lie, but every word is delivered with the conviction of someone who has been promised something, or threatened with something, that makes the truth irrelevant. Tyrion's face, as Shae testifies, is the face of a man watching the last thread snap. He has endured his family's contempt for decades. He has endured his father's hatred, his sister's plotting, his nephew's cruelty. He has served as Hand of the King and saved the city during the Battle of the Blackwater, and no one thanked him, and no one remembered. He has borne the weight of being a Lannister who is despised by Lannisters, a dwarf in a world that treats dwarfism as a punchline or a curse. And now the one person who he believed loved him for who he was is standing in front of the court and confirming every fear he has ever had. That he is not lovable, that he is not worthy, that even the love he thought was real was just another transaction in a world of transactions. And that is the moment Tyrion breaks. Not the way Theon breaks. Not into submission, into rage, into the cold, crystalline fury of a man who has finally understood the rules of the game and decided that if the game will not give him justice, he will burn it down. His speech is not a defense. It is an indictment. He looks at the court, at his father on the judge's seat, at the crowd of people who have come to watch him die, and he tells them the truth. Not about Joffrey's murder, about himself, about them. He says he is guilty. Not of killing Joffrey, of being a dwarf. He has been on trial for that his entire life. He says he saved them. He says he saved all of them during the Battle of the Blackwater, and he should have let Stannis kill them all. He says he wishes he was the monster they think he is. He wishes he had enough poison for the whole pack of them. The courtroom goes silent. The crowd is stunned. Tyrion is not performing. He is not playing a role. He is speaking with the absolute clarity of a man who has nothing left to lose. And in that clarity, in that moment of total, fearless honesty, he demands a trial by combat. Not because he believes in the justice of the gods, because he has just learned, in the most brutal way possible, that there is no justice among men. The darkness of Tyrion's trial is not in the verdict. It is in the system, it is in the revelation, that the institutions of justice in Westeros are, like every other institution in the show, tools of power dressed in the language of fairness. The trial is fair in form. There are judges, there are witnesses, there is testimony and cross-examination, and the appearance of due process. But the substance is rotten, the outcome is fixed. The process exists not to find the truth, but to give the powerful a way to destroy the powerless, while maintaining the fiction that rules apply. That is a very specific kind of darkness, and it resonates beyond the world of the show. Because the audience has seen trials like this. Not in Westeros, in their own world. Trials where the outcome is predetermined. Trials where the evidence is shaped to fit a conclusion. Trials where the institutions of justice serve the interests of the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. Tyrion's speech lands so hard because it is not just about a dwarf in a fantasy kingdom. It is about anyone who has ever stood in front of a system that claims to be fair and discovered, through bitter experience, that fairness was never part of the design. And Peter Dinklage plays every note of it. The hurt, the fury, the sarcasm that is not really sarcasm, but a thin coating over a wound so deep it has no bottom. When he says he wishes he had enough poison for all of them, you believe him, not because Tyrion is a murderer, because Tyrion has been murdered, slowly, his entire life, by a family and a society that sees his body as a joke and his mind as a threat. And the trial is the final killing blow, the moment where even the pretense of belonging is stripped away, and Tyrion stands before the world as what he has always known himself to be in his darkest moments, an outsider, a monster, a dwarf. The show will redeem Tyrion, in some ways. He will become Daenerys' hand. He will advise kings and queens. He will survive to the final episode and give the speech that puts Bran Stark on the throne. But the trial never leaves him. You can see it in the way he drinks, in the way he flinches when people mention his family, in the way he tries over and over to be useful, to be valuable, to earn through service the acceptance that should have been given to him by birth. The trial taught Tyrion what the show taught all of us, that the systems we build to protect the innocent are only as good as the people who run them, and the people who run them are not, as a rule, interested in protecting anyone but themselves. Let us move on to the final stretch. There is one more battlefield we need to visit. One more death that needs to be examined. Not because it is the most complex or the most thematically rich death in the show, because it is the most deliberately cruel, the most specifically designed to hurt, not just the character who dies, but the character who is watching. And the character who is watching is Jon Snow, and the person who dies is his brother. Battle of the Bastards. Season 6, Episode 9. It aired on June 19, 2016. Written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and directed by Miguel Sapochnik. The episode contains one of the greatest battle sequences ever filmed for television. But before the battle, before the cavalry charges and the shield walls and the piles of dead so high they become a landscape, there is Rickon. Rickon Stark, the youngest Stark child, the one the show spent the least time developing. The one who disappeared for entire seasons, a footnote in a story about his more prominent siblings. Rickon was captured by the Umbers and delivered to Ramsay Bolton, and now, on the morning of the battle, Ramsay brings Rickon onto the field. The setup is simple and sadistic. Ramsay releases Rickon. He tells him to run to Jon. The battlefield stretches between them, a vast, open plain with no cover. Rickon runs, and Ramsay draws a bow. Jon sees his brother. Jon rides. He spurs his horse forward, racing across the field, trying to reach Rickon before the arrows do. And the audience watches, knowing what is coming, knowing the rules of this show, knowing that hope is a weapon that Game of Thrones uses against you. Ramsay fires. The first arrow misses. The second misses. And for a moment, for one heart-stopping moment, It seems like Rickon might make it. Jon is getting closer. Rickon is running. The arrows are falling wide. And then the last arrow hits. Rickon falls. He dies on the field, face down in the dirt, within yards of Jon's reach. And the cruelty of it is surgical. Ramsay was never going to let Rickon live. The arrows that missed were not misses. They were theater. Ramsay was toying with Rickon the way a cat toys with a mouse, letting him believe escape was possible, because the hope makes the death more entertaining. The entire sequence was designed by Ramsay and by the show to cause maximum pain to Jon Snow, to draw him forward, to make him charge, alone, into the middle of a battlefield, abandoning his strategy, abandoning his plan, abandoning everything Sansa had warned him about, because his brother was dying in front of him and he could not stop himself from trying to save him. And that is the darkness of Rickon's death. Not the death itself, though the death is heartbreaking, the fact that it was a game, the fact that Ramsay understood Jon Snow well enough to know exactly how he would react, the fact that Ramsay used a child, a Stark child, as bait, not even as a hostage, as bait. The distinction matters. A hostage has value as long as they are alive. Bait has value only in the moment it is taken. Rickon's death was the lure. The hook was Jon's love for his brother, and Ramsay set that hook with the precision of a man who understands that the most effective way to destroy an enemy is to use their best quality against them. Jon's love is his best quality. It is also, repeatedly, his greatest vulnerability. He loves his family. He loves the Night's Watch. He loves the wildlings he was supposed to kill. He loves Daenerys. And in almost every case, that love leads him into danger. The mutiny at Castle Black happens because Jon's love for the wildlings leads him to make a decision that his brothers cannot accept. The Battle of the Bastards nearly becomes a massacre because Jon's love for Rickon leads him to abandon his position. His refusal to stop loving Daenerys leads him to follow her into a war that ends with the destruction of a city. Game of Thrones has a thesis about love, and the thesis is cruel. Love in this world is not a strength, it is a liability. The characters who love the most, who feel the deepest, who act on their affections with the greatest conviction, are the characters who suffer the most, and who make the decisions with the most catastrophic consequences. Robb Stark married Talisa because he loved her, and it cost him the Frey alliance and his life. Catelyn released Jaime Lannister because she loved her daughters, and it cost her the trust of her sons Bannerman. Cersei armed the Faith Militant because she loved Tommen and wanted to protect him from the Tyrells, and it led to her imprisonment and humiliation. Stannis burned Shireen because he loved his duty more than he loved his daughter, and it cost him everything. Love is not the answer in Game of Thrones. Love is the question, and the question is always the same. How much are you willing to sacrifice for the people you love? And the answer, no matter what the character chooses, is always too much. Rickon's death on the field before the Battle of the Bastards is a small moment in the grand scheme of the show. He is not a major character. His death does not reshape the political landscape of Westeros. It does not inspire a soliloquy or a revelation or a transformation. It is simply a boy running across a field while arrows fall around him, and then an arrow that does not miss, and then a body in the dirt. But the smallness is the point. In a show full of grand betrayals and spectacular violence, the simplest cruelty, a child used as a toy by a man who kills for sport, cuts as deep as anything the show ever did. Because Rickon never had a chance, not a real one, and everyone watching knew it, and they hoped anyway. And the hope made the arrow worse. That brings us to the final darkness, the darkness of a hero's fall, the darkness of watching someone you believed in become the thing they swore to destroy, the darkness of realizing that the line between liberator and tyrant is not a wall. It is a step, one decision, one moment on a dragon's back, with the bells ringing below, where you choose mercy or you choose fire. Daenerys chose fire, and the show asks you to think about why, not to excuse it, not to explain it away. Just to think about it. About what it means when the person who promised to break the wheel becomes the wheel's most destructive expression. About what it means when the crowd that cheered the burning of slavers has to watch the burning of innocents and reconcile those two things. About what it means when the darkest story a show can tell is not about a villain, but about a hero who ran out of reasons to be one. And there is one more darkness we need to sit with. One that is easy to overlook because it happens to the character we trust the most. The character who seems, for most of the show, to be exempt from the moral compromises that define everyone else. Jon Snow dies. He is murdered. By his own men. The episode is Mother's Mercy, the same episode as Cersei's Walk, Season 5, Episode 10, June 14, 2015. Jon Snow has just returned from Hardhome. He has seen the army of the dead. He has watched the Night King raise the fallen. He knows, with an absolute certainty that no other character in the show possesses, that the war between the living and the dead is the only war that matters. And he has made the decision to allow the wildlings through the wall, to give them shelter, to save them, not because he likes them, but because every wildling who dies north of the wall is another soldier in the Night King's army. It is the right decision. It is arguably the only sane decision, and his brothers kill him for it. They lure him to a courtyard. They have set up a sign that says traitor. One by one, they step forward and drive their knives into his body. Alliser Thorne, Bowen Marsh, Othel Yarwick, men he served with. Men he fought beside. And then, last of all, Ollie, a boy, a child whose village was slaughtered by the wildlings, whose parents were killed by the very people Jon Snow has chosen to save. Ollie steps forward with tears in his eyes and drives his blade into Jon's chest and says, "For the watch." Jon Snow bleeds out in the snow. He dies. The camera holds on his face as the life leaves his eyes and the blood pools beneath him, and the silence is total, and the screen goes black. He will be resurrected, of course. Melisandre will bring him back in the second episode of Season 6. But the resurrection does not undo the betrayal. It does not erase the experience of dying at the hands of people you trusted. When Jon comes back, he is different, quieter, more tired. He executes the men who killed him, including Ollie, and the look on his face as the boy hangs is not satisfaction. It is exhaustion. It is the look of a man who has learned what it costs to do the right thing and who is no longer certain the cost is worth paying. Jon's death and resurrection form the dark spine of his character arc, because Jon keeps doing the right thing. He keeps making the hard choice, the unpopular choice, the choice that puts the greater good above his own safety. He fights the dead at Winterfell. He bends the knee to Daenerys because the North needs her dragons. He tells Sansa and Arya the truth about his parentage even though he knows it will cause problems. He is, in every way that matters, the closest thing this show has to a truly good man, and the show rewards him with nothing. Absolutely nothing. His men kill him. The woman he loves becomes a tyrant. He is forced to kill her. He is sent back to the wall, back to the edge of the world, back to the place where his story began, with nothing to show for any of it, except the knowledge that he did what was right, and it cost him everything he ever cared about. Jon Snow's story is dark, in a way that the show never explicitly states, but constantly demonstrates. It is the story of a good man in a world that does not want good men. Not because goodness is impossible, because goodness is expensive, because the price of doing the right thing in Westeros is always higher than the price of doing nothing. And Jon pays that price, over and over, and the world gives him nothing in return except more chances to pay it again. When Jon kills Daenerys in the final episode, The Iron Throne, the 6th episode of Season 8, which aired on May 19, 2019, the act is framed as a mercy, as a necessity, as the only way to stop a queen who has shown, by burning a city, that she will never stop burning. And perhaps it is all of those things. But it is also this: a man killing the woman he loves because the world has once again placed the terrible weight of doing the right thing on his shoulders, and no one else's. He kisses her, he holds her, and while she speaks of the world they will build together, the world she has just tried to burn into existence, he puts a knife in her heart. And Daenerys looks at him, and the look is not betrayal, it is confusion. The confusion of someone who genuinely believed she was doing the right thing, who genuinely believed the destruction she wrought was liberation, who genuinely believed that Jon Snow, of all people, would understand. He did understand. That is why he killed her. Because he understood that Daenerys' conviction was the same conviction that burned Shireen, the same conviction that armed Cersei, the same conviction that makes every tyrant in history believe they are saving the world, even as they set it on fire. Daenerys was not evil. She was certain, and certainty, in Game of Thrones, is the most dangerous thing a person can possess. Jon's final scene shows him walking north, beyond the wall, leading the wildlings into the true north, away from the kingdoms, away from the throne, away from the game. And the show wants you to read this as a bittersweet ending. Jon is free. Jon is away from the politics and the bloodshed and the impossible choices. Jon is going home, in a way, to the place where the distinctions between wildling and crow, between bastard and king, no longer apply. But sit with it for a moment. Really sit with it. The man who saved the world, who brought the living together against the dead, who killed the woman he loved to stop a genocide, is walking into a frozen wilderness with nothing. No crown, no family, no home, no recognition. The world he saved has already forgotten why it needed saving. The Game of Thrones continues. The small council bickers. The lords jockey for position, and Jon Snow walks north, into the trees, into the cold, into a future that looks like nothing. That is not a happy ending. That is not even a bittersweet ending. That is the ending of a man who gave everything and received nothing, and the show presents it without commentary, without music that tells you how to feel. Just a man, and the snow, and the long, long silence of a world that never deserved him. That is Game of Thrones. That is what this show did, across 8 seasons, 73 episodes, and nearly a decade of cultural dominance. It told stories that were dark not because they were violent, though they were violent, not because they were shocking, though they were shocking, but because they were true, true to the logic of power, true to the psychology of trauma, true to the way that good people can do terrible things, and terrible people can do understandable things, and the line between the two is never as clear as you want it to be. The darkness of Game of Thrones is not in its dragons or its armies or its ice zombies. It is in its people, in the choices they make when they are desperate, or powerful, or afraid, in the systems that reward cruelty and punish decency, in the gap between the world as it should be and the world as it is, in the silence after a little girl stops screaming, in the sound of bells that no one listens to. These are the darkest stories this show ever told, and the reason they stay with you, the reason you think about them years later, the reason they visit you in the middle of the night when you are trying to sleep, is not that they are extreme, it is that they are recognizable. Underneath the swords and the dragons and the castles, these are stories about power and its costs, about love and its failures, about the terrible, irreversible things that happen when people decide that their cause, their crown, their survival, their pain, matters more than someone else's life. Game of Thrones put those stories on screen with a clarity and a commitment that no show before it had attempted. And for all the debates about its final seasons, for all the arguments about pacing and character arcs and whether the ending was earned, the darkness endures, the Red Wedding endures, Hodor endures, Shireen's screams endure, the Night King's arms, raised in silence, endure, Cersei's bare feet on the cobblestones endure, Oberyn's skull in the mountain's hands endures, and Daenerys, on dragonback, choosing fire, endures. These stories are why we are still talking about Game of Thrones, not the spectacle, not the budget, not the dragons, the darkness, the willingness to go to the places other shows would not go, and to stay there long enough for the horror to settle into your bones. The show premiered on April 17, 2011, and it ended on May 19, 2019. 8 years. 73 episodes. A cultural phenomenon that, at its peak, united more viewers around a single television event than anything since the finales of the Great Network era. And the thing that made it possible, the thing that separated it from every fantasy adaptation that came before, was its willingness to be dark. Not gratuitously dark, meaningfully dark. Dark in ways that asked questions about power, about loyalty, about the gap between the world we want and the world we get. Other shows had violence. Other shows had betrayal. Other shows had morally complex characters. But Game of Thrones was the first show to commit fully to the idea that narrative safety is an illusion, that the audience's expectations are not a contract the show is obligated to honor, that a character can be loved by millions and still die in a way that is ugly and unfair and unredeemed, and that the willingness to depict that ugliness, that unfairness, that absence of redemption, is not cruelty toward the audience. It is respect for them. It is the show saying, you are smart enough to handle the truth. You are brave enough to look at it. You do not need us to protect you from the reality of what power does to people. The darkness of Game of Thrones changed what television could be. It opened a door that shows like The Last of Us and Succession and House of the Dragon walked through. It proved that audiences did not need hope to keep watching. They needed honesty. They needed the feeling that the story they were being told was not going to lie to them, even when the truth was painful, even when the truth meant watching a character they loved do something unforgivable, even when the truth meant that the hero dies and the villain wins, and the system grinds on exactly as it did before. That is the legacy of the darkness. Not despair. Clarity. The clarity that comes from a show that refused to look away, that held its camera on the screaming and the burning and the silence after, and said, "This is what happens. This is what people do when they have power and fear and nothing to stop them. This is the world, not the world of dragons and ice zombies. The world, yours, the one outside your window." And if you are drifting now, if your eyes are heavy and the words are starting to blur together, that is all right. Let them. Let the stories settle. Let the names, Ned and Robb and Sansa and Theon and Shireen and Hodor and Daenerys and Jon, let them become part of the darkness behind your eyelids. Not the frightening kind of darkness, the comfortable kind. The darkness of a story that has been told, that has found its shape, that rests now in the place where finished stories go. The long night is not just a threat, it is also a place where stories live when they are done being told. A place where the darkness is not empty but full of everything we have talked about tonight, full of the weight of every choice and every consequence and every gap between what should have been and what was. Rest in that fullness. Let it hold you. The stories will be here when you wake up. They will be here tomorrow, and next week, and next year. Because the darkness of Game of Thrones is not the kind that fades. It is the kind that stays. Not because it is heavy, because it is true. Thank you for staying with us through all of it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here in the long night where the darkest stories are also the ones that matter the most. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.